ñoo ngi noonu teg nañu corner ba. corner baa ngi noonu waa Daaroo ko moom. waa Daaru ñoo teg seen corner fas yéene koo dóor mu jëm ci camp yi. bàyyil jàpp bi. bàyyil jàpp bi.
alors corner qui sera joué par Omar. Omar moo koy joué noonu.
moo ngi noonu kon.
et ça discute entre l'arbitre ak ki nga xam ne mooy le capitaine Casemiro.
ñoo ngi noonu Casemiro.
ak ki nga xam ne moom mooy Mbaye Casemiro ak Mbaye ñooy bousculer noonu.
ñoo ngay buuxante.
ñoom ñooy bousculer noonu.
ñooy mel ni kuy mbapat Moussa.
Aïcha Omar.
arbitre bi bu leen gisee dina leen atte.
c'est Omar qui va exécuter ce coup franc.
arbitre bi bu leen gisee atte leen.
Omar
bal ba jóg na.
attention.
Moussa lii lan la.
la ilaha ya Allah.
Moussa lii lu mu doon.
sukran laka ya Allah.
Moussa lii lan la.
attention.
waaw ña nga ca.
arbitre bi nee na ko nga teg bal bi.
arbitre nee na tegal bal bi da nga koo bërëg muy daw nee na teel bal bi. loolu mooy ray ko ba mu dee. ray ko ba mu dee na bal bi taxaw. yéen ñi nga xam ne yéen a ñuy seetaan ñëwoo leen.
Aïcha ballon joué rapidement par Sora
Malick.
Vieux qui va relancer très loin devant.
yëkkati na ko.
pour chercher le numéro 13.
numéro 13
Youm.
waaye
et ballon contré par Mendy.
Mendy
qui accompagne cette balle. Et ça va sortir en touche effectuée par Mendy. La déviation du numéro 21.
numéro 21 bu Darou Salam Moussa.
Il s'appelle Ozil. Il s'appelle Ozil. ayca Ozil Mendy mooy touche bal bi noonu.
ñoo ngi noonu. ma fàttali leen ne Darou Salam moom touche bi noonu. parce que ne ko touche mu jëm ci camp yi déggoo yi.
ayca Ozil pour
ña nga ca. Ozil
pour Rone pour Mendy. Mendy qui met cette balle devant, dégagé par Cheikh Mbengue. Dégagé encore par Kali. Et Amdi. Face à Bébé Lam. da koy gunge. da koy gunge ba mu génn mbay.
gunge na ko ba bal bi génn si
da koy gunge ba mu génn.
maa la wax lii. ña ngay doxal Moussa.
ayca waaw. dégagement encore de Vieux. Ballon récupéré par Kali qui va relancer sur Rone et la faute de Rone.
Rone moo def coup franc bi.
La faute de Rone sur Youm.
waaw Rone moo def faute ci Youm. Youm mu ngi may fàttali Thierno Youm Moussa.
ndeysaan mbay da ngaa yàgg nag.
mbëkk bal teg dënn dóor mu dugg.
Thierno Youm Amar Gueye Sène.
waaw ay Bokande.
Jules François Bokande.
ay Cheikh Seck Moussa.
aca ballon Vieux harcelé par Kali et qui met cette balle en touche.
bal ba génn na touche Moussa. touche ba jóg na.
aca la touche de Bébé Lama.
ña ngay am Diop joxal Ndiaye.
mu daal di jox ki nga xamante ne.
am Diop joxal Ndiaye
Ozil qui va relancer pour chercher Galaye, mais ballon intercepté par Amdi. Dégagé. Le dégagement encore de Baba. La tête encore du numéro 6 de Darou Salam. C'est Fali. Aja ballon récupéré encore par Ozil. Amdi qui récupère cette balle. Très mal joué par Fali. Attention. Cette fois-ci, c'est Deggo qui va attaquer. Et il n'y a pas de faute. Arbitre nee na dara amul.
Arbitre nee na jógal da ngaa tarxis.
ñu dem.
nee na da ngaa tarxis jógal ñu.
ballon centré pour Galaye.
Galaye.
Le gardien Sora qui sort.
parade gardien.
Sora qui sort.
bal ba gardien ba jàpp
pour
na ko.
récupérer cette balle.
def na
va jouer avec, il va relancer sur Vieux.
ña ngay doxal.
Et c'est Cheikh Ben qui revient.
ayca
Cheikh pour Youm pour Ali.
am Diop joxal Ndiaye arbitre nee na coup franc.
Et la faute.
numéro 6 Darou bi
de Fali
numéro 6 Darou Fali.
sur Ali.
Fali moo def faute ci Ali.
Sidi Rama à Ansou Abdou.
waaw
tonton Ali. Ali fa la ne woon mbay.
Ali Fali.
Ali ak Fali.
Ali ak Fali ngoogu. coup franc ba ñu ngi koy waxtaane Moussa ña ngay consulté wu. ña ngay passe ba jóg na Moussa. on joue rapidement bal ba jóg na mbëkkaat na ko ña ngay doxal kan la Daarooy doxal.
Attention, va chercher l'opposé mais ballon très mal joué par le numéro 7
Moussa.
de de Darou.
dafa yaakaaroon
Galaye
ne bi génn na fekk daa taxaw.
ah ouais Galaye ni mu ko joué baaxul.
Galaye dafa retard. moo ngi noonu ña ngay doxal. ñoo ngay doxal. yéen ñi nga xam ne yéen a ñuy seetaan ma fàttali leen na ñu ngi si seen première mi-temps 1-0 ba léegi. 0-0 ba léegi Moussa. ndam demagul ndam dikkagul ñu ngi si seen première mi-temps fii ci stade Niakoulrab Moussa.
ayca ballon touche pour Bébé Lam.
Bébé lañ se tey touche bal bi noonu Moussa. Bébé lañ seet moo tulli noonu. ña ngay doxal. bal ba génn na tuus. bal ba génn na tuus Moussa. tuus baa ngi noonu waa déggoo ñoo ko moom tuus nañ ko. tuus ba Diop na ñu ngay fubal am Diop joxal Ndiaye am Diop joxal Ndiaye
ballon récupéré par aussi Galaye et ballon contré par
la défense et de sécurité
le numéro 18
la défense et de sécurité
c'est Cheikh Mbeng
moo def intervention foofu ña ngay doxal Darou ngay doxal waa Darou Bébé lañ set a ngi noonu Moussa tuus Darou ko moom Bébé lañ set a koy tuus noonu Bébé lañ set ña ngay doxal Darou ngay doxal récupéré nañ ko déggoo ñëwaat na ci waa Darou doxal bal ba contré nañ ko mu génn tuus Moussa.
alors touche toujours.
waaye ba léegi Darou moom tuus boobu Moussa.
ah oui Mbaye Darou c'est normal parce que Darou l'année dernière moom moo éliminé Japon en demi-finale dem ci li nga xamante ne moom mooy finale bi face à Arafat donc il doit confirmer son statut parce que dans ce match-là Darou est favori face à Deggo. ballon récupéré par Ali va donner pour Mbaye. attention gardien bi def na erreur.
waaw Moussa lu neloon a xew noonu Moussa.
la ilaha illa Allah.
Moussa génnab gardien bi lu mu doon.
takra fi siwaaxa.
Moussa génnab gardien bi lan
ila makanati ofiya.
Moussa gardien bi lu mu def nii.
yaa Mbaye.
Moussa gardien bi lu mu def nii.
la ilaha illa Allah.
Moussa gardien bi saraxe woon na leen.
takra fi siwaaxa.
Moussa lii lan la.
attention Mbaye gardien bi sooy génn dafa war a wóor.
waaw daa war a leer.
un gardien ça doit être sûr.
ay waay gardien Darou Salam.
attention Deggo qui va pousser.
Deggo mooy pousse.
Ali.
voilà. Ali Nguy Ndiaye.
Ali déedéet Mbaye.
Ali Zor. Moussa.
Mbaye Ali Zor.
Moussa baal ma wax Ali Nguy Ndiaye. wala Ali Zor. Ali la.
ayca mooy noonu.
Ali la Moussa.
alors c'est le numéro 13.
ña ngay tous.
qui va relancer Youma pour le numéro 6. attention.
ña ngay doxal
dégagé par Baba.
Darou.
dégagé récupéré par Casemiro.
ñoo yore bal bi noonu.
attention Ozil.
Darou doxal.
Galaye. à mode de poitrine. Galaye. Qu'est-ce qu'il va faire? Galaye va donner pour le numéro 30. Et le gardien Sora.
Sur les bras de gardien Sora Malick.
nga ne lan Mbaye.
ma ne ko sur les bras de gardien Sora Malick.
Mbaye bàyyi li ngay def waay.
Moussa nu ma ko lakkee déggee ko noonu.
non yow kay gars yi fi mu toll nii man ma si yow dara.
man nee naa la nu ko nit déggee na ko déggee noonu. sur les bras ñu koy tuus bal ba waa Darou tuus noonu. lañ seta ñu noonu Moussa. Bébé lañ set a ngi noonu delloo na ko la défense et de sécurité bu Darou door na la défense et de sécurité ñu ngay doxal Moussa.
ayca mooy noonu la tête de déviation de Galaye. et le gardien Soro qui met sa tête.
Soro mbëkk na bal ba Moussa.
et touche.
Soro mbëkk na bal ba arbitre bi nee na touche la Moussa.
touche pour Darou Salam.
Darou Salam ñoo moom touche bi noonu. le numéro 12 de Darou Salam mooy tuus bal bi noonu Moussa jëmale ko ci kaay déggoo yi tuus ba jib na Moussa Galaye.
ay jamono noonu.
ña ngay doxal. lu ma gis noonu
le centre la tête.
sur les bras de gardien Sora Malick.
trop mou Mbaye.
waaw mbëkk bi baaxul mbëkk bi dafa yolof dafa ndaw Moussa kii lu muy def nii. la arbitre nee na coup franc am na. arbitre nee na déggoo ñoo moom coup franc bi Moussa. nee naa la Moussa ñaari équipe yëpp ku ci nekk da ngaa bëgg a ndam Moussa ndaxte ku nekk wax na xam na ne victoire ouverture moom fam la mën a yóbbu Moussa dafa sori sa premier match nga gagné ko Moussa fam la mën a jëmee dafa sori Moussa ñoo ngi noonu waa déggoo ñoo moom coup franc bi noonu ñoom ñoo teg bal bi fas yéene koo jëmale ci camp Darou Salam yi coup franc baa ngi noonu waa Deggo ñoo ko teg Moussa moo ngi noonu ba léegi ma leen di fàttali yéen ñi nga xam ne yéen a ñuy seetaan 1-0 ba léegi ndam demagul ndam dikul ñu ngi ci seen première mi-temps fii ci stade Niakoulrab laay la nee naa la aujourd'hui je suis augmenté Moussa parce que la fois passée Malika la ma fekk aujourd'hui maa ngi fii ci stade Niakoulrab
ay jamono noonu le coup franc
moo ngi noonu di doxal coup franc ba jóg na.
sera joué par le gaucher.
waaw sur les bras de gardien de Darou Salam.
Cheikh Mbengue.
Cheikh moo
sur les bras.
ña ngay doxal.
de Madi qui dégage.
Madi moo dégagé.
récupéré par Galaye.
Galaye def na passe.
Galaye qui va jouer avec Ozil. Face.
Ozil tulli na ko mu génn Moussa.
Ozil face à Youm.
Moussa Ozil tulli na ko mu génn.
mais Ozil mënul dem.
non mënul dem parce que ñaar ko séq Moussa ñaar.
et le gardien.
Le gardien en train de coucher Moussa.
nga ne.
Le gardien en train de coucher Moussa.
mais Sora est à terre.
Sora à terre. Sora sur terre.
Sora
à terre.
Sora
à terre.
Sora
à terre.
sur terre.
Sur terre Sora.
dans terre.
à terre Sora.
Sora à terre.
sur terre Sora. à terre Sora terre la Moussa. Sora ngi noonu tëdd ci suuf di bërëng.
Ça c'est le président de la zone 7 de Jaxaay. mon ami mon frère.
secrétaire particulier.
tey daw ma bureau.
ñoo ngay doxal Sora ngi ne la jot. Sora tëdd noonu ci suuf. Zori ku ci nekk woo nañ la di consulter wu ak yow. ñii ñu ngi leen di wax seeni erreur. ñii ñu ngi leen di wax nan la ñu mën a def bal dugal benn. ñaari équipe yëpp ku ci nekk say njiite ngi wax ak yow. pour nu ñu làqal cee bii bi waaye ba léegi ma fàttali leen ne fii si stade Niakoulrab ci entre Darou Salam ak Deggo ndam demagul ndam dikkagul moo ngi noonu ma fàttali leen ne Darou Salam ñoom ñoo sol mayo yu vert olive yi Deggo ñoom ñoo sol bula blanc yi Darou Salam olive Deggo bula blanc moo ngi noonu 0-0 ba léegi ku ci nekk yaa ngi consulté wu ak ñi nga xamante ne ñooy say njiit yéen ñi nga xam ne yéenay seetaan KM Info live en direct teg seen barada ak seen i kaas ci seen salle.
ndeysaan.
info di leen ko jox live en direct loolu laa naan bu la lekk olom na ko gërëmee coy ñu ngi fii ci stade Niakoulrab Moussa aujourd'hui la barre est levée Moussa.
pourquoi.
Parce que l'année passée, on est à Malika.
Oui.
Aujourd'hui, on est à l'stade de Niakoulrab Moussa.
Lan.
Le bar est levé.
Voilà.
Wow, parce qu'aujourd'hui, on a ici le stade de Niakoulrab Moussa.
Ah, wow.
Wow.
Lan.
Je suis monté Moussa.
Akhraja alma min almi.
Mala wax li.
Akhraja alma min almi fi Niakoulrab.
Lolo leer. Cey sama waji kenn du yow.
Le bar est levé.
Le bar est levé.
Aja ballon joué par Youm.
Ña ngay doxal Youm.
Youm qui va essayer de centrer ballon contré par Mendy.
Mendy moo ko contré mu tuus Moussa.
Voilà, Mendy moo contré bal bi noonu.
Tuus ba jóg na. Tuus ba Ajina Mango.
Ajina Mango.
Il a prêt d'enlever Mango Moussa.
Il a
prêt pour enlever Mango Moussa.
Bàyyi li ngay def waay.
maa la wax lii.
Aja Darou Salam Deggo toujours. 0-0. On est à.
waaw.
0 but partout.
0 but partout ci entre Deggo.
occasion manquée.
par Deggo. ña ngay doxal.
20-21 minutes jouées dans ce match.
ña ngay doxal
la balle.
door na ko bal ba ca kanam nga Moussa.
Aja.
ña ngay doxal.
Aja ñu dem.
ña ngay doxal Amdi.
face à Mendy.
Et
la faute de Amdi, oui. La faute de Amdi sur Mendy.
La balle est prête Moussa.
Ndeysaan Mbaye deuxième match bi nar a neex. Moussa ay mbooloo Arafat kañ la ñuy tàqalikoo ñoom ñaar ci àdduna.
ma ne la Moussa loolu du yomb de.
Mbaye mbooloo Arafat kañ la ñuy tàqalikoo ñoom ñaar ci kaw suuf.
waaye yaakaar naa ne tey dinañ tàqalikoo Moussa.
ah loolu nga yaakaar.
yaakaar naa ne tey ndam dina jóge fenn am fu mu dem Moussa.
Mbaye ragal naa ne ndam demul ndam digul.
la Moussa, le ballon est tapé sur le profil de joueur de Deggo. Le ballon est tapé sur le profil de Deggo.
mais Mbaye profil mooy lan.
maanaam kanam xar kanam. Moussa bal bi dal na ci xar kanamu benn jour.
xanaa photo profil ngay wax.
Moussa déggee ka ni ma la ko waxee. Le ballon a tapé sur le visage de jour de Deggo Moussa. waaw maa la wax loolu.
waaw boobu de moo gën a jub moom.
Le ballon a tapé sur le visage de jour de Deggo Moussa.
nga ne le ballon a tapé sur le.
visage de jour de Deggo.
wala nga ne sur le.
sur le profil de jour de Deggo.
c'est le numéro 8 Kali qui est à terre.
waaw
le gardien à terre le numéro 12 à terre. mais presque 3 jours de Darou.
kon daal Moussa su ma la ko waxee tous les jours de Darou à terre.
sur terre.
sur terre.
dans terre.
dans terre. lépp terre. c'est la terre. c'est la terre Moussa. regarde-moi le drone qui circule Moussa. regarde-moi le drone qui circule dans le stade. le drone qui circule dans le stade Moussa.
Mbaye yaa wóor.
maa wóor Moussa moo ngi noonu. ma fàttali leen ne 0-0 ci entre Deggo ak Darou Salam ndam demagul ndam dikkagul ba léegi ñu ngi ci seen première mi-temps nee naa leen yéen a ngi koy seetaan fii ci KM Info ba mu ñëwee ba léegi dara rawatu leen jaaraama KM Info maa ngi kontaan ci sama caméraman bi Gallo Thiello nuyu naa la Al Ousseynou siyaar na ma leen nee naa leen da ngeen a yaakaar ne yéen équipe yi yéen kese yéen a amee remplaçant ak ñun dañoo amee remplaçant de waaw
ci biir ko
ña ngay doxal le gardien de Darou Salam à terre Moussa.
waaw toujours à terre.
maa la wax loolu. le gardien de Darou Salam à terre. moo ngi noonu. le gardien de Darou Salam à terre.
Adja le gardien de Darou Salam.
élevé.
c'est relevé.
maa la wax lii.
le gardien s'est relevé.
le gardien de Darou Salam élevé.
Madi. c'est relevé.
arbitre baa ngi wax ak moom.
jàppoo fubalul parce que première heure bi jàppoo ak ki nga xamante ne moom ak Jubo ñoo waroon a jouer première heure malheureusement démb waa Jubo dégg naa bi ñuy def seen feu de joie dafa amoon problème ñoom ak équipe bi nga xamante ne moom mooy dëkkandoo ñoo bokk poule. ñoo xaw a dendee. ba tax na gars yi jël ay mesures annulé li nga xam ne moom mooy premier match de jàppoo donc jàppoo loolu moo tax première heure bi jàppoo joué wul. ñu annulé li nga xam ne moom mooy première heure bi.
kon daal Moussa
Mbaye ce qui est déplorable mooy pendant ce temps bi ñuy annulé match bi waa jàppoo ñu ngi woon regroupement añ nañ ba pare def nañ lépp li ñu waroon def ba war a solu pour ñëw stade la nouvelle bi tombé. Galaye qui va dévier cette balle dégagée par le numéro 17 de Deggo ballon dégagé encore par Vieux par Cheikh Mbeng autant pour moi. Kali qui va récupérer cette balle Kali pour Ogil Galaye contré.
Le défense et de sécurité bu Deggo
c'est Vieux qui va dégager.
Vieux moo ko dégagé.
Ballon récupéré par le capitaine Djibi.
Le défense et de sécurité.
Dégagement encore. Récupéré par le numéro 6, Mali. Le gardien.
Le gardien, c'est les bras de gardien Moussa.
Sora qui va
Malik.
récupérer cette balle.
mu ngay réglé relance na ko latéral bi Moussa. latéral bi jox na ko numéro 2 bi Moussa ña ngay doxal.
Adja dégagement
delloowaat na ko latéral bi.
Bana pour Amdi. Ah non, c'est Vieux pour le numéro 14, c'est Ali. Ali mooy transversé noonu milieu terrain bi. Mais très mal joué dem ba fële joxe bal bi nii.
amul njëriñ
Adja ballon récupéré par Ozil.
Lancet.
Mbaye Lancet. Galaye en position de hors-jeu.
Galaye
da ngaa lang.
da ngaa langa Galaye.
Galaye damaa foog ne daa jàppee boppam apprenti.
Galaye daa jàppee boppam waa Tivaouane Peulh yi oto Tivaouane Peulh yi Moussa.
Aïcha la faute.
arbitre tiré na pour Moussa.
Faute sifflée à l'entrée de la surface de réparation.
maa la wax lii. jour yaa ngay kaas mais arbitre nee na coup franc la.
décision bi arbitre bi jël loxo ba pare.
nee naa la bu ko jëlee jéem a Moussa.
arbitre jël na décision ba pare mbay du.
la décision est prise.
te fii amul VAR amul dara.
moo tax ma ne ko Moussa la décision est prise.
quand nga ne lan.
Moussa, la décision est prise.
Et quand c'est pris la décision.
C'est fini.
C'est fini.
maa la wax lii. maa la wax loolu Moussa.
mais Mbaye li ngay wax ni amul fenn.
maa la Moussa, la décision est prise.
Et si l'arbitre prend sa décision.
C'est fini Moussa.
Il ne peut plus revenir.
Hop 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 hop, ça y est.
Y a pas de VAR.
Y a pas de VAR.
amul dara.
déedéet.
alors coup franc.
Deggo ñoo teg coup franc bi noonu.
Deggo ñoo am coup franc noonu.
jëmale ko ci kay Darou Salam yi Moussa.
Et
c'est qui va tirer le coup franc Moussa?
Parce que c'est Cheikh Mbengue.
Cheikh Mbengue.
Qui va jouer ce coup franc.
Cheikh Mbengue.
À l'entrée de la surface de réparation.
Cheikh Mbengue moo ko teg noonu Moussa.
Du gardien de Darou Salam, Soro qui met.
Soro moo teg
en train de placer son mur.
maa la wax loolu.
Aïcha.
Moussa ki teg bal bi
est en train d'expliquer mur bi bari na.
Moussa Deggo ki teg bal bi kan la.
Il va frapper directement dans les buts de Cheikh Mbengue, dans les buts de Madi. Aïcha mu ngi noonu Mbaye.
Deggo ñoo teg coup franc bi.
Attention. Attention.
Arbitre souffle na Moussa.
Attira.
Arbitre souffle na.
Attira. C'est très mal joué Mbaye.
C'est très mal joué Moussa.
C'est très mal joué.
C'est très mal joué.
C'est très mal joué.
da koo dóor mu dal ci biir bi.
Attention.
jog na.
Aïcha.
jog na.
Attention. Ballon contré. Attention ba léegi.
ba léegi ña nga ca.
ñu dégagé mais génnul ba léegi.
génnagul de ñu nga ca ba léegi.
le capi avec son pied gauche. Attention.
bal ba lii lan
mettre la tête.
ah.
Ballon récupéré encore. par le numéro 2. Et c'est une faute.
Faute la arbitre wax. gaañ na la défense et de sécurité bu Darou Salam.
Faute de Omar.
Faute de Omar.
Ballon joué perdu par Mendy, récupéré par Omar encore.
maa ngay doxal.
Et dégagement de Omar.
génn na tous.
Et touche.
Tous Moussa.
Pour Darou Salam. La touche. Attention Ozil.
ña ngay doxal
Mbaye. Mbaye. Et le gardien, attention. Mbaye. Le Gabi. La tête.
Moussa lii lu mu doon.
waaye Mbaye mooy li nga gis rek.
Moussa lan la.
Mbaye mooy li nga gis rek.
waaye Moussa mbëkk bi ban mbëkk la.
Très grosse occasion marquée par Ali. Ali qui manque. Une très grosse occasion. mais Mbaye Darou Salam bi daa mel ni li mu andi woon daaw la andi ren.
Moussa.
Mbaye Darou daa mel ni li mu andi daaw ba final moom la andi.
waxal waay.
daa mel ni li mu ne woon daaw ba léegi jóge fi. avec Omar. Dégagement.
Bal ba génn na 6 mètres Moussa. Bal ba génn na 6 mètres Moussa.
Dégagement de Cheikh Mbang.
Bal ba génn na tous Moussa ña ngay doxal.
Dégagement de Cheikh Bodian.
ña nga noonu
Adja ballon récupéré par Galaye. Galaye va mettre cette balle devant. Récupéré par le gardien Sora. Le numéro 24. Relancé sur Youm. Le numéro 13. Youm. Il va gagner quelques mètres. C'est sur l'autre côté. En profondeur. Attention. Le gardien qui sort et qui va boxer cette balle. Récupéré par Ali. Ali. Et la faute de Mendy.
Mendy moo def ko
Ali.
ci Ali Moussa. ñoo ngi noonu. waa Deggo ñoo moom coup franc bi noonu. fas yéene koo teg jóor ko mu jëm ci camp yi Daaru Salaam yi Moussa. ma wax leen ne leen match bi yéen a ngi ci 0-0 ba léegi.
ay jamono yi noonu.
ci ànd Deggo ak Daaru Salaam 0-0. waa ayca moo ngi noonu 0-0 ba léegi coup franc baa ngi noonu.
ayca moo ngi noonu ñu jouer rapidement le coup franc et c'est le numéro 6 Cheikh Bodian.
ñoo ngi jéggalu ci coupure bi
Cheikh Bodian
ci koo xamante ne nii moom moo débranché woon suñu prise bi daal di branché téléphone am may la yow mi ko def boo ko xamul bu ko defati ñu ngi leen di jéggalu looloo waraloon coupure bi ñoo ngi noonu coup franc ba tegu na.
aja Cheikh Mbengue
waa Deggo ñoo teg noonu jëmale ko ci camp Daaru yi Moussa teg nañu Moussa ña ngay jolli coup franc baa ngay tegu arbitre bi coup d'envoi bi lay xaar. jolli na
Cheikh Bodian
coup franc ba jóg na.
Bodian qui met cette balle, attention.
Moussa lan la.
C'était le coup franc de Cheikh Bodian.
Moussa lan la.
Dévié par le numéro 14.
Moussa lan la.
C'est une but.
Moussa
c'est un but autant pour moi.
Moussa lan la.
Sur un coup franc de Cheikh Bodian.
Moussa lan la.
Frappé directement.
Moussa lan la.
Et dévié.
Moussa lan la.
Par ki nga xam ne mooy le numéro 14.
Moussa bal bi lu mu def.
De Deggo.
ñoo am ñaata.
Et c'est Ali qui dévie cette balle.
Et
Deggo qui ouvre le score.
1-0.
Deggo qui mène 1-0.
1-0.
Alors donc 1-0.
waaw.
ndeysaan mu rendre hommage ki nga xam ne mooy Jogo Jota.
ndeysaan.
ba xam nga Jogo Jota.
mooy joueur bi def soog bi Moussa.
ndeysaan adduna bi yëpp jooy nañ. donc Deggo qui voilà mais depuis un certain temps Deggo qui dominait, qui avait des occasions. Wow. Et finalement les occasions se sont concrétisées. Wow. Et Deggo qui mène 1-0.
maa la wax loolu. yéen ñi nga xam ne yéen a ñuy seetaan fii di stade Niakolop à travers KM Info nee nañ leen Deggo moo mëneegul Daaru Salaam 1-0. 1-0.
On est à 44 minutes dans ce match.
match baa ngi jëm ci yoon itam.
يا وهيب لها إلا بمال يلزق لها في غربتي انتصفت صمله يقول يا بنالتي بنالتي لا
ay Moussa li lan la.
Mais comment il a pu commettre cette petite erreur?
looloo sama problème Moussa.
mais mbay défenseur bi nelaw na.
Moussa mënoo am waxaguñu dara nga créé penalty Moussa.
défenseur ba nelaw na.
kooku c'est une grande erreur Moussa.
amul protéger da ngay dégager mu jóge.
da ngay dégager tullil mu génn.
amul protéger.
bul protéger say biir surface. tullil mu génn mbaa nga
ah
gunge.
ouais, il n'avait pas vu.
gisul
xoolul derrière lui xoolul kii ñëw. Oh, la réponse.
La réponse automatique Moussa.
La réponse automatique Mbaye.
La réponse c'est une réponse automatique Moussa.
Mbaye loolu jum na tey.
ay Moussa.
mais Mbaye li ma jaaxal mooy des fois nga for.
waaw tey for na.
La réponse
est automatique.
de qui?
de Darou Salam Moussa.
Après quoi?
Oh, après le but de Deggo.
Après qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Oh, c'est la réponse.
Oui.
C'est la réponse de Darou Salam.
Et c'est la réponse
de Darou.
Automatique.
Penalty tiré par qui?
Non, c'est la réponse parce qu'ils ont créé une occasion.
C'est la réponse parce que l'occasion
ils ont créé l'occasion de répondre. Mbaye.
Oui, c'est l'occasion de répondre de l'ASC DEGGO.
Mais Mbaye, c'est la réponse
c'est la réponse automatique, Moussa.
Mais si la réponse n'est pas automatique.
Ouais, mais l'action est automatique.
Oui.
Si le penalty n'est pas marqué,
oui.
Il a raté, mais c'est la réponse automatique.
Ah oui, mais il a créé l'action.
Il a créé la réponse.
De répondre automatiquement.
Oui, Moussa.
Bàyyi nga reporter kii bi penalty.
Dama la ne Moussa, Deggo daa dugal. Premier centre Moussa. Gars yi centre contre-attaque am. L'ASC Darou Salam a créé un penalty. C'est une réponse automatique Moussa.
Voilà,
il marque, il a confirmé. Il a confirmé l'automatique. S'il rate aussi tamit, il a confirmé l'automatique Moussa. Il a confirmé l'automatique Moussa.
Alors c'est Galaye Mbaye.
C'est Galaye qui va tirer le penalty de l'ASC Darou Salam.
Galaye face à Soro.
Galaye face à Soro Moussa.
Galaye face à Soro.
L'automatique est réussi Moussa. L'automatique est réussi Moussa.
Alors l'occasion.
Oui.
Automatique
est réussi.
Et Galaye qui répond automatiquement.
Galaye a répondu l'ASC Deggo automatiquement Moussa.
Égalité, un but partout.
Un but partout.
Ndam demul.
Ndam dikul.
La ndaw sa doon bañ.
Waaw looloo am.
Loolu la ndaw sa doon bañ.
Ndam demul.
Waaw.
Ndam dikul.
Waaw.
Looloo am.
Waaye jamono noonu un but partout Mbaye.
Un but partout Moussa.
Un but partout.
Moo ngi noonu.
Alors but marqué du côté de Darou Salam par le numéro 7 Galaye.
Galaye.
Sur une petite erreur du défenseur. Et c'est la mi-temps.
C'est la fin du premier mi-temps, Moussa.
C'est la
fin du premier mi-temps.
Mais Mbaye, tu manges quoi?
Beignet.
Mais comment on peut reporter et manger du beignet?
Non, je suis faim.
Je suis là.
Faim, Moussa.
Naka gars yi yamale foofu. Alors gars yi ñu ngi leen di jox dig daje ci kanam coupé leen micro yi. Ba ci kanam tuuti.
ci diggante Deggo ak Darou Salam Deggo dafa dugal même pas 3 minutes Darou Salam daal koy répondre moom aussi tamit seen deuxième mi-temps coup d'envoi bi jib na ay ca ñu ngay doxal waaye balaa boobu maa ngi nuyu waa bisab bi waa ruq bi maa ngi leen di nuyu di leen ziare xam naa ne fi mu ne yéen a ngi may seetaan yéen a ngi ñuy déglu à travers KM Info di nuyu suñu président bisab bi ñu koy wax Zal Mbeng maa ngi koy nuyu di ko ziare bu wér a wér Aliou Diouf ziar naa la Zé Diouf Ala Ndiaye Mbaye Diène tout ça Moussa Pagnam maa ngi koy nuyu di ko ziare bu wér a wér ak Moussa Diop.
ayca di nuyu
moo ngi noonu
mon frère Omar Diop prof EPS.
Omar Diop prof EPS Moussa nuyu na
nga xam ne mon frère Abdou Karim Seck depuis la France.
maa ngi nuyu Mamadou Bari.
di nuyu mon fils Mambiram Diouf depuis les États-Unis d'Amérique.
depuis États-Unis d'Amérique.
ki nga xam ne moom mooy aussi Semouba depuis les États-Unis d'Amérique.
loolu leer na Moussa.
mon ami mon frère Afia depuis les États-Unis d'Amérique.
ndeysaan.
di nuyu ñëpp ñi nga xamante ne ñu ngi bitim réew di seetaan match yi.
yaa ngi leen di nuyu.
bu baax a baax di nuyu ki nga xam ne moom mooy Pa Diété.
Pa Diété.
Papu Malan Diété.
Papu Malan Diété.
di ko ñaanal yàlla suñu borom daal di koy defal li nga xam ne mooy tawféex.
tawféex Moussa.
ndeysaan Pa Diété borom jardin bi.
borom jardin bi Moussa.
jaajëfal bu baax a baax a baax a baax.
Moussa daa mel ne ñooñu mooy ñi nga xam ne bu leen neexee doon jour bu leen neexee doon kankoran.
ndeysaan waaw ñoom la Pa Diété. ak ki nga xam ne mooy Lamine Seck.
Moussa Lamine Seck Moussa.
ñooñu maa ngi leen di nuyu Omar Diop.
Omar Diop.
Malick Diouf.
Malick Diouf.
ki nga xamante ne mooy Moustapha Faye.
Moustapha Faye.
ak P4.
P4.
ñooñu samay ami lañ dama leen di nuyu fu saa su ne mbay.
say ami d'enfance la ñu
ne Sénégal ak ñi ne Europe yëpp maa ngi leen di nuyu bu baax.
kon képp ku nekk ci àdduna wërngal këpp rek yaa ngi koy ziar.
waaw maa ngi leen di nuyu ñi nga xam ne ñu ngi seetaan.
waaw
wala di ñu déglu
auditrice.
am na ñoo xamante ne ñu ngi ñuy déglu si rajo bi.
loolu leer na Moussa.
di ñu seetaan si télé bi.
looloo leer.
am ñoo xamante ne si yenn dëkk yi ñu ngi ñuy dégloo ca rajo ba mbay.
ndeysaan ca rajo ba Moussa.
di leen jaajëfal bu baax a baax a baax a baax.
déggal loolu.
di am kontante lool si ñoom.
ndeysaan.
di leen jaajëfal bu wér la touche effectuée par Amdi la déviation Ozil ballon récupéré par Bébé Lam. ballon dégagé encore par Cheikh Bodian. attention Mbaye qui va mettre son pied. bal bi day génn Mbaye.
lu mu def nii Moussa.
arbitre nee na corner la da doon éviter li nga xam ne mooy corner bi. mais Mbaye gardien bi daa génn pour éviter corner bi après mu glissé daanu.
gardien bi da doon éviter corner far indi corner.
ah oui.
il a évité de amener corner le corner est devenu réel Moussa.
Mbaye bàyyi li ngay def
maa la wax loolu Moussa.
da ngay saboté par yenn saa yi.
Moussa nu ma ko lakkee téewee ko noonu.
benn saa li ngay wax nii xam nga ne attention le corner. attention Cafias la tête de Mendy. ballon récupéré par ki nga xam ne mooy Cheikh. dégagé par Bébé Lam. récupéré par Amdil Moustapha. waaw mais Mbaye Bébé Lam rasé na ko.
may la Bébé Lam seet wat na ko Moussa.
Bébé Lam waj na ko.
Bébé Lam rasé na ko Moussa. ba pare nag di laaj arbitre lan la.
ayca carton encore.
waaw arbitre bi boo moytul da lay ndaw tal puusal.
nga ne la doroon.
le doron en train de circuler Moussa.
il est en train de survoler.
il est en train de survoler Moussa. survoler yëpp voler la Moussa. jàppal li ma la wax. doron bi bu ko neexee jóg bu ko neexee wàcc.
mais nga ne survoler ak lan.
survoler yëpp voler la Moussa.
lépp day voler rek.
waaw maa la wax loolu.
ndeysaan les femmes de Xayra Mbay namm nañ la.
ndeysaan les femmes de Xayra maa ngi leen di nuyu.
ndeysaan sa fan si nee naa.
j'espère que 2025 bi les femmes de Xayra pleurent pas Moussa.
attention Cheikh Bodian encore.
Bodian mooy dóor noonu Moussa.
Cheikh Bodian qui va encore.
tirer
le coup franc encore sànq si coup franc la dugaloon. non c'est Djibi la tête de Galaye Baye Galaye.
moo ngi noonu.
et la touche encore.
pour Deggo.
Amdi pour chercher Papa.
ña ngay doxal.
attention Djibi.
Son.
Gibson bronze. Cheikh. ballon encore. attention. Bamba yàlla
Moussa lii lan la.
oh quel ballon sorti par le gardien. le gardien
Darou Salam. Madi Moussa.
Madi qui sort.
oh là 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 là.
cette balle pour empêcher le deuxième but.
waaw
de Deggo corner qui sera joué par Amdi.
bal ba jóg na.
aca Amdi pour chercher une tête. la tête Dembay récupéré par Kali. El Khalidou. Kali pour Ozil. Taclé par Vieux. Attention Omar. Moudef Louche. Kaye Mbeukat Baba Mbeuk bal bi. Aca Vieux encore. Il va prolonger de l'autre côté. Mendy qui va s'interposer. Da koy protéger. Mendy Ndiago ma Mendy.
Ndiago a protégé le ballon.
Et finalement mu daal di génn touche pour Darou Salam.
ña ngay doxal.
La tête encore.
ña ngay doxal.
Dégagement, ballon récupéré. Aliou. Centre. Pour le gardien. Attention. Jàpp na ko à 2 temps.
Moussa loolu moo tudd faxas.
Bébé Lam.
Bébé lañset.
Bébé Lam.
Bébé lañset tous.
Et finalement.
Tous Moussa.
Finalement.
Bébé Lam
moom mi doon tous mais moo mujjee def tous bi.
moo mujjee def tous bi Moussa.
nga ne lan.
Bébé Lam.
Ah oui.
Bébé Lam a créé un tous Moussa.
et qu'avec la décision, pas de gestion impossible. Mais voilà, on a vu aussi Deggo voilà, qui a payé. C'est normal parce qu'en matière de foot, la domination n'est pas synonyme de victoire. On a vu Deggo qui a dominé sur tous les plans, mais Deggo qui a été improductif surtout au niveau des exceptions. Et ce qui a fait que normalement, par rapport à cette domination, on aurait dû assister à 2 ou 3 buts déjà dans la première. Mais ça veut dire que franchement, ils étaient là pour jouer collectif.
waaw ay jamono bay ñëwaat nañ waaw ñëwaat nañu
mbir mi ñëwaat na
ñëwaat na ñoo ngi noonu Moussa
rate woo leen lu bari
waaw li ngeen ci rate xawuta bari ñu ngi leen koy jéggalu bu baax a baax a baax waaye bu ñëwaatee ci match bi Moussa waaw retard bi ñu waxaat leen ko rek ndeysaan benn booy moo fekk suñu prise bi mu coupé contact bi benn xale daal fekk ñu nekk ci mu coupé contact bi ñu ngi nekkaatoon ci abalancement yeeg affaire yooyu ñu ngi leen koy jéggalu
ñëwaat
nañu ñu ngi nii ñaari gardien yëpp boo xoolee kii daa daanu jóg keneen ki ci des daanu ñoo ngi noonu gardien bi daa daanu jóg ba ca des feelu ko ci wet gi
Juboo di joué parce que Juboo moo waroon joué première heure
waaw
mook jàppoo match bi am problème ñu annulé li nga xam ne mooy match bi
ñu annulé premier match bi Moussa daal di indi deuxième match bi waroon na doon deuxième heure moo mujj doon première heure
voilà
waaw léegi noonu lay demee moo tax ñu indi leen match Darou Salam ak Deggo ma fàttali leen ba léegi 1-1 la ndam demagul ndam diggu ñoo ngi noonu ba léegi 1-1 la ci diggante Darou Salam ak Deggo ñoo ngi fii ci seen stade Niakorop gaay yi nee naa leen seetaankat yi ñëw nañu ak ñaari équipe yaa ngi fubal sécurité bi doy na Moussa.
ayca ñaari góol yi ñoo tëddoon noonu.
waaw bii daa tëdd jóg bee tëdd moom benn gardien bi jóg na waaye beneen bi moom ba léegi mi ngi ci suuf ñi nga xamante ne nii ñoom ñoo yor wàllum paj mi ñoo koy xool ndax dina mën a continuer wala moo ngi noonu ñoo ngi fii ci stade Niakorop ci diggante Darou Salam ak Deggo ba léegi 1-1 moo ngi noonu foofu la match bi toll ci seen deuxième mi-temps.
Voilà, deuxième mi-temps. Quelques minutes jouées ci deuxième mi-temps bi les deux gardiens ku nekk tëdd na ba mu neex jox moroomam mu tëdd.
waaw kii daa tëdd ba jóg daal di keneen ki feelu ko Moussa.
voilà ñaar ñëpp jug nañ. voilà moom nag xam naa ne day jël carton nag kenn laalu ko. xam nga kii sax au moins am na contact.
kii contact la am daal di daanu
waaye kii moom amul benn contact mu nekk en terre.
moo tax ma ne la arbitre bi dina ko ndawtal Moussa.
waaw da koy mboqal.
arbitre bi da koy ndawtal loolu mooy avertissement.
voilà mooy noonu day jël mu ngi expliqué mais arbitre bi fi mu toll nii déggul dara nag.
da koy xaar rek ba mu pare
génn na ba pare te mënatul dugaat.
moom kay loolu mooy entrée moom mooy
carton
sortie sans entrée.
nga ne.
sortie sans entrée Moussa.
mais Mbaye bàyyi li ngay def waaye.
maa la wax loolu jàppal li ma la wax.
ala jox na ko waaw moo ngi noonu.
may la ndawtal na ko Moussa.
alors maintenant changement
du côté de
Deggo et de Darou Salam. alors Deggo va lancer 2 flèches. ki nga xam ne moom mooy Papa day génn.
waaw génn na.
ak ki nga xam ne mooy Omar génn nañ.
le numéro 8 et le numéro 10.
ñoom ñoo dugg noonu.
ñoo dugg Moussa.
donc moom xam naa daa andi fan si clubam.
waaw ñoo yuuxu na.
numéro 10 bi daa dugg rek fan si club bi yuuxu.
waaw.
mais heureusement takkuñu ay banderole.
takkuñu dara kon fan si club bi.
du côté de Darou Salam.
waaw Darou Salam.
c'est Ozil qui va sortir.
le numéro 21.
ah moom mooy Ozil.
waaw le numéro 5 bi mooy dugg.
numéro 5 la Rastaman Derek Lux.
Rastafaya. mooy dugg Moussa.
Rasta Bamba Kalata.
ma nga ne la ca biir.
mooy rentré noonu.
ayca.
et c'est Sora qui va dégager.
Sora Malick.
et le jeu va reprendre.
maa la wax loolu Moussa.
ayca mooy noonu.
ayca ña ngay doxal.
Sora qui va dégager.
dégagement ba jóg na.
Sora tulli na bal bi mu jëm ca kaw. déviation du capitaine Djibi. la tête encore. la bi laisse jouer. récupérer encore. dans li nga xam ne mooy profondeur bi attention. attention la frappe contrée par ki nga xam ne moom mooy le numéro 18 Cheikh Mbeng. La tête de Lam.
Lam a ngi noonu Moussa.
Lam pour le numéro 30 Ali qui va relancer. Dégagé encore par Vieux. Ali, Kali. Attention, le numéro 7, profondeur. Pour le tour numéro 10, nee na ko dugal. Ba pare contrôler lu muy def. Da koy dindi dem ci biir. Jox ko profondeur. Attention. Quelle jolie action.
Mais Moussa, quelle jolie inde.
Mais manqué par l'attaquant. Mais gisul. dafa sigiwul xool.
Sauvé par le gardien de.
Alors s'il avait regardé le gardien Mbaye.
du ko laal ko
day réceptionné bal bi.
maa la wax
cherche
loolu.
deuxième poteau. Attention la tête de Galaye. Ali qui va contrôler.
Darou.
Ali qui va récupérer.
Darou doxal.
Ali day temporiser. Renverser de l'autre côté. Vous cherchez Galaye qui va mettre sa tête. Contrôler encore cette balle le buteur. Pour Mendy. Mendy en profondeur. Contré par Vieux. Récupéré. ñu dem jox ki nga xam ne mooy Ali moom tamit.
Ali doxal.
beneen Ali. Ali poto lampe Ali fil Ali rajo.
arbitre nee na coup franc.
voiture Ali.
maa la wax loolu.
voiture Ali.
Moussa. waa Deggo ñoo moom coup franc bi noonu Moussa.
aja coup franc qui sera effectué par
l'ASC Deggo.
Le défenseur
Aïcha.
Vieux da koy mettre en profondeur. Pour le tour nouveau numéro 10. waa ji glissé na daanu.
Moussa.
mënoo daanu ba pare marquel.
bëgg a marqué.
waa ji ne ko mënoo daanu daaneel mais mënoo daanu marqué. C'est impossible.
mënul ne.
Alors toujours un but partout.
waaw.
C'est au stade de Niakoraba. Entre Deggo et Darou Salam.
ndam demul ndam dikul.
la ndaw si di bañ fi mu toll nii fa la match bi toll.
Moussa.
ndam demul ndam dikul.
maa la wax loolu.
la ndaw si di bañ fa la match bi toll.
teg nañu coup franc ba Moussa.
Aïcha Mbaye je rappelle ki nga xam ne.
waaw.
moom mooy équipe bi nga xam ne mooy mbooloo ñëw na.
la
tête de Vieux. récupéré encore. on a perdu. Djibi va mettre en profondeur. Pour le numéro 10. Lam. Ballon contré. protégé na ko babal bi génn Mbaye Lam ndeysaan.
ay Lancet waay.
Mbaye Lam kan la lay fàttali.
Lancet.
ban waay kan la lay fàttali.
Lam mi.
Kiné Lam.
Mambamba. moom moo woyoon dogo.
du mu ko way. Aja ñu dem Mbaye ba pare nga ñëw ci dogo yi.
ña ngay football
Aja ballon joué devant. dégagé encore. Vieux.
ñu nga ca.
mu jox le numéro 10. xamuñu nu mu tudd nag.
numéro 10 daal jàppal numéro 10.
nañ ko jàpp ma waaw waa ji moom jaxlam na.
coup franc.
Aja Mbaye daa mel ni waa ji fi mu toll nii.
Moussa numéro 10 bi daa pare pour gagner match bi.
daa andi toujours attention.
ma nga ca.
da koy contrer wala day bàyyi mu génn na.
moog lañ seet Moussa.
Et touche pour Deggo qui est en train de pousser dans ce match.
ña nga ca Moussa.
La ilaha ya Allah.
ña nga ca.
Shukran laka ya Allah.
aywa.
Aïcha centre deuxième poteau. La tête. Attention. Manqué encore.
Moussa ki amul concentration ci mbëkk bi
Manqué encore.
Moussa ki amul concentration ci mbëkk bi Moussa.
ay waay Mbaye lu mu def nii.
ay Moussa kii li mu def manque de
quelle occasion manquée par Mbaye.
c'est une but marquée Moussa.
mais kii mooy Mbaye wëndeelu xanaa.
waaw Mbaye wëndeeloo ñu noonu.
Mbaye manqué na occasion boo xam ne da ngay mbëkk rek mu dugg.
Moussa.
attention ne pas regretter.
ña nga ca.
et la faute.
may la Moussa. ña
la faute de Cheikh Mbeng.
kooku mooy joueur Darou Salam la Moussa.
à la faute Cheikh Mbeng mooy le défenseur.
waaw le défenseur de sécurité.
ayca doron baa ngoogu Mbaye ca digg terrain ba.
doron baa nga nele. naaw na ba ca wetu coup franc ba mu taxaw.
ayca mooy noonu.
waaw ña ngay doxal.
mooy noonu Mbaye.
waaw ña ngay doxal waaw.
le coup franc
Darou Salam ñoo ko moom Moussa.
voilà Darou moo am occasion coup franc bi noonu.
xamal naa la ne ñeenti joueurs ngi taxaw di consulter wu Galaye jëlee na élan xaw ma na ku ko ciy door. coup franc ba tegu na. numéro 5 baa nga fa numéro 10 bi ak numéro 7 bi Galaye.
Attention à ne pas
en tout cas daal ñu xool fan la
regretter ces occasions manquées du côté de
Darou
de
Salam Deggo.
attention à ne pas.
Galaye jëlee na élan ñu xool fan la war na di mujjee ki gëtam Moussa.
Aja mooy noonu Galaye.
Galaye.
ballon contré. waa ji numéro 10 bi am na faute.
am na faute Moussa
am na faute waaye.
Lancet faute na bal bi.
Lam moo faute bal bi noonu.
Lancet moo faute bal bi Moussa.
Et le coup franc est obtenu par le numéro 10.
Lancet.
Aja mooy noonu. toujours un but partout.
moo ngi noonu Moussa.
ndam demagul ndam dikkagul.
Deggo moo door noonu la défense de sécurité.
da koy protéger mu génn sortie de 5 mètres 50. da koy dégager mu génn noonu. sortie de 5 mètres 50.
Gardien bi relance na rapidement.
Mu relancer là-bas sur Baba. Baba dégagé noonu. Contrôle manqué day dem ba ci surface bi. Gardien bi tarxis mais cette fois-ci génn na ba jël bal bi.
maa la wax lii.
Aïcha Soro qui va relancer.
def na relance.
Sur Amdi.
Soro Malick
contré par le numéro 6.
ña ngay dox am
Aïcha ñu joué
le numéro 8.
rapidement. orienté sur le côté gauche.
ña ngay doxal.
ki nga xam ne. moom mooy Youm yéeg na. ballon attention. day door. Ah, ça passe au-dessus. Ça passe au-dessus de Madi, début de Madi.
ma ne ko capitaine bi moom moo door bal bi noonu.
voilà moo ko door mu jaar ci kaw li nga xam ne moom mooy kaw Madi.
ki nga xam ne moo takk seen ndombal tànk Moussa moo door bal bi noonu.
ay jaboy noonu. Baba
ña ngay paasante.
Baba xëy na la nekkoon daaw.
Baba.
alors contré encore récupéré par le numéro 10. day dem ay ca Amdi pour le numéro 10 profondeur bi. da koy centré. attention nous contrer encore. domination nette de Deggo. Deggo qui domine mais qui ne marque pas. et ça attention nawétane la. à tout moment situation mën na changer. soo dominé da ngay dugal.
boo dugalul gars yi ëlbatiku dugal la.
Amdi.
looloo leer corner baa ngi noonu tege.
Amdi.
corner baa ngi noonu tege. waa Deggo ñoo ko teg. door
na Amdi moo centré noonu deuxième poteau. la tête de Mendy. gars yi récupéré ko. Vieux mooy récupéré noonu. jox na ki nga xamante ne mooy Aliou. bu centré encore gars yi mbëkkaat Baba. ballon pour Kali. le contre Kali. ballon très mal joué par Kali. entraîneur bi demandé ki nga xam ne moom mooy Cheikh Mbeng mu temporisé. jàppe sur numéro 10 bi. day def profondeur pour Amdi. waaw. profondeur bi moo doon yoonu match bi mbay.
mais nom
de Dieu.
Moussa bul chercher lu difficile.
non avant muy orjo le départ.
bu mu chercher lu difficile Moussa.
ah oui faut pas chercher le difficile.
naka ko indil nii mu dem.
bay nga ne lan.
bu mu chercher lu difficile Moussa. fu bal bi fii la woon Moussa.
c'est foofu mooy chemin bi
foofu la Moussa du feneen.
ah oui mu ne daa orjote ma ne ko avant muy orjote nga koy jox.
nga koy jox Moussa.
ah oui amul xaar.
ña nga ja.
mais sa waay kii ñëw na.
kan la
moo newoon nu mu tuddati. dëkkandoo la newoon daaw. moom dëkkandoo la newoon daaw encore.
kii mooy ndaamal Gosaas Moussa.
mooy gaz bu ndaw.
Moussa gaz bu ndaw a ngi noonu Moussa. le petit gaz.
le petit gaz.
le petit gaz près de entrer Moussa. maa la wax
loolu changement. du côté de Deggo.
ma nga ca biir cum.
et c'est le numéro 7.
dugg na Moussa.
Djibi qui sort.
Moussa
Djibi la ñu génne capitaine bi attention. Darou la tête attention.
arbitre nee na orzo la Galaye moo ko door noonu Moussa. Moussa ba léegi ñaari équipe yi ku nekk yaa ngi koy wut Moussa.
ayca.
mais ba léegi ndam demagul ndam dikkagul ñu ngi ci 1-1. ba léegi
dégagement
Soro Malick.
qui va relancer sur Vieux. Vieux jàppaat ci ki nga xam ne moom mooy Soro. mu dégagé récupéré encore. dégagé par le numéro 5. gaz bu ndaw récupéré na bal bi.
waaw maa la
numéro 8 bi. ñu prolongé là-bas jusqu'à Youm. da koy mettre ci profondeur bi. pour chercher Mbaye. mu jox ko dégagement de Casemiro.
corner Moussa.
dégagement de Casemiro.
Casemiro bu Deggo Moussa.
Casemiro bu Deggo Casemiro bu Sénégal.
waaw Casemiro Deggo Sénégal.
Casemiro Darou Salam. aja da koy dindi. Youm
ba wax na ko.
mais cette fois-ci doo jàll.
protégé na ko ba ànd ak moom ñu génn Moussa.
waa ji nee na ko doo jàll.
maa la wax loolu match bi ba léegi mi ngi ci 1-1 yéen ñi nga xam ne yéen a ñuy seetaan à travers KM Info ndam demagul ndam dikkagul 1 but partout maa la wax loolu ñu ngi ci seen deuxième mi-temps ña ngay doxal
Aja la tête.
Aïcha Darou Salam
Numéro 17 Amdi Baba. Amdi Moustapha.
bal ba génne na
Et
tout
c'est sorti de 5 mètres 50 pour
maa la wax loolu
Darou Salam.
gardien bi moo yor bal bi noonu gardien bi moo yore bal bi noonu Moussa
Aïcha mooy noonu dégagement.
ñoo ngi noonu
Casemiro qui dégage.
6 mètres bi jóg na
Mais bal bi day génn tous la mënu ko contrôler mbay.
Lancet moo waroon a contrôler Moussa mais
Aïcha Amdi qui va mettre cette balle devant pour que le petit noo ko tuddee mbay.
gaz bu ndaw
Aïcha ballon récupéré encore. Ça va aller du côté de Darou Ali.
Aïcha
Ali va mettre en profondeur. Contré. Arbitre nee na dara amul.
arbitre nee na jógal ñu football
Ballon récupéré encore pour le numéro 10. Moom moo jël place capitaine bi.
bal ba génn na
Dafa
tuus
ñu ko contrôlé baaxul très mal contrôlé cette
bal ba
balle.
génn na tuus
Et
Moussa
finalement, c'est une sortie de touche en faveur de Darou Salam. Va récupérer Kali qui va mettre son pied. Kali qui va se battre. Ballon récupéré, attention.
ña ngay doxal Ali Ali Moussa
Ali da récupéré na ñëwaat. Mais ni mu joué balle bi baaxul récupéré encore.
Ali da nga
Ñu dem
récupéré
du
ba
côté de
pare
Darou Salam maintenant.
Da nga
Le
def
contre est du côté de Darou.
passe
Gars
bi.
yi contre ko mu dem ñu joué encore. Da ngay jox cette fois-ci gis nga noonu la foofa yoon bi. Fii mooy yoon bi foofu mooy yoon bi. Et c'est une touche
nee na coup franc la Moussa
en faveur de Darou Salam.
arbitre bi coup franc la tiré Moussa
En faveur de Darou Salam.
Darou Salam
Touche.
ñoo moom coup franc bi Moussa
Wala coup franc.
coup franc la arbitre tiré
Ami nee na coup franc.
coup franc baa ngi noonu ci diggante Darou Salam ak
Darou Salam moo am coup franc noonu
waaw
mbay.
ñoo ngi teg coup franc bi noonu
Aïcha dégagement.
bal ba jóg na
La tête
bal ba génn na tuus Moussa
de Cheikh Meng.
le numéro 18 de l'ASC DEGGO
Cheikh Tidiane Meng.
Cheikh Tidiane Mbengue
Alors touche effectuée par l'âme.
Mooy
Cheikh
noonu.
qui met sa tête encore.
ñoo ngi noonu
Aïcha faute.
ñoo ngay doxal
Faute sur ki nga xam ne
ñoo ngi noonu Moussa maa ngi
moom
nuyu-
mooy Cheikh Bodian.
maa ngi nuyu sama waa kër Moussa jiital ci nuyoo bi maire dëgër Moussor maa ngi koy nuyu di ko ziar
Badiel Sadou.
waa sama yaay ju baax ji di nuyu maam Sal Thiaw
waa dëgër bu sóor.
waaw di nuyu sama ñeenti jéeg
ñu ngi koy nuyu.
waaw bu baax di nuyu sama ñeenti jéegi
di féliciter sama gars yi waa Yëmbal Handball Club.
waaw handball club
ndeysaan ñoo dem ba Saint-Louis daal di daan waa Jaaji Sarr.
dem ba Saint-Louis daal di jël waa Jaaji Sarr Jaaji ruur si suuf
waaw ñu ma match bu metti sax.
waaw looloo leer
Aïcha ballon joué gaz bu ndaw.
ña ngay doxal
va mettre cette balle devant pour chercher li nga xam ne moom mooy profondeur bi.
Waaw.
L'intervalle mais contre Ali.
Daaru
Ali encore.
Daaru
Qui va mettre cette balle devant.
Oh.
Et cette balle va arriver directement dans les bras de Sora.
Sora Malick moo dégagé
Dégagement
noonu
de Sora.
Mhm.
La tête de l'âme.
Lam
Récupéré encore du côté de Deggo.
Deggo.
Amdi Moustapha.
am Diop joxal Njaay
Amdi
ji
dem na.
am Diop
Amdi day
joxal
dem.
Njaay Amdi
Attention pour le nouveau capitaine.
waaw
mais
mënu
mënoo
koo
daw loolu.
Moussa mënu koo daw
Bal moo gën a gaaw nit.
bala gën a gaaw nit mënoo koo daw
mënoo
Moussa
daw loolu.
Moussa changement pour le côté de Darou Salam
Daaru mooy dugal ñaari cartouche mbay.
waaw dugaloon na ñaari cartouche léegi Moussa
mbay di encouragé xale yi nga xam ne suba ñoo war a dem ca jongante BFM ba ndeysaan.
ndeysaan Moussa
xale yi troisième yi.
ku ci yàlla may nga xam ne loolu la yàlla dogal ku
si yàlla may
wuti waat
si yàlla may nga xam ne loolu la dogal.
waaw ma ne la xoolal ñàkk a gën dee
waaw ñàkk ba pare dee moo gën a bon
ñàkk a
nag.
gën dee Moussa waaye ñàkk a dee baaxul
waaye am ba pare itam dee baaxut.
waaye boo ñàkkee santal yàlla boo amee santal yàlla
moo tax ñu leen di encouragé bu baax a baax mbay.
maa la wax
li
loolu
nga xam ne ñoo war a dem defi suba li nga xam ne moom mooy BFM.
waaw
ñu tuddee ko brevet de fin d'études moyen.
nee leen daal buñ ko yenu
bu ñu ko yenu
waaw
bu ñu tiit
bu ñu tiit bu ñu raf
bu ñu stressé.
déedéet
BFM dong la.
lekkal naanal
BFM rek la.
soo ko amee
nga xam
c'est
ne
pas la fin du monde
soo ko amul.
c'est pas la fin du monde
ndax le monde.
le monde est toujours monde le monde est toujours devenu le monde Moussa
man pare naa si wax ji bu yàgg
man de maay wax
aja mooy noonu lam.
ñoo ngay doxal
ballon
Lam.
contré du côté de
Lancet.
Deggo.
ñoo ngay déggoo
aja dégagement encore contré
Moussa,
par le numéro
contré,
6.
bal ba génn na tous Moussa.
Cheikh Bodian. Et
Bodian.
touche pour l'âme.
Lam
arbitre nee na ko
arbitre nee na la baaxul
à refaire.
lam arbitre bi nee na la
Arafat ñëw na Mbaye.
ay la yàlla.
le double champion ñëw na.
le double champion.
ki jël coupe bi ñaari yoon ñëw na.
maa la wax ñëw nañu.
ki door ñëpp ñëw na.
waaw waaw.
ki mën ñëpp ñëw na.
waaw waaw.
waaye ñu xool lan lay indi ren.
ñu xool na fan lay mujjee.
Cheikh Bodian deuxième poteau. et le gardien Madi.
Madi moo ko jël noonu.
qui s'interpose dégagement. on récupère encore.
waaw.
par ki nga xamante ne mooy Youm. da koy renversé.
Youm yëkkati na ko
attention bu rombee nga dee.
bu rombee nga dee Moussa.
finalement Casemiro liir na loolu. finalement.
Casemiro bu Darou Salam.
Mbaye di nuyu kële nga xam ne mooy romb na le.
waaw.
muy le président de la zone 5.
ñu koy wax Djibisi.
président Djibisi nga noonu.
Jibee ngi noonu.
président de la zone 5 bu Kër Massar.
ñaari xale yu jigéen na ko escorté muy ñaadam.
waaw buñ ma escorté woon sax ma ñaadam.
laay la
aja la tête.
Moussa sama adduna
Baba.
góor rek laay bañ mu escorté.
Baba encore qui récupère cette balle. dégagé Amdi qui va contrôler cette balle. mu jàppee sur Cheikh.
Cheikh gaz bu ndaw
le petit. modèle. joxe pour son capitaine le tout nouveau capitaine.
moo kii lu mu def nii. kii lu mu def nii Moussa.
il voulait faire du Ronaldinho de Niakorapa.
ah lii baaxul waay.
Ronaldinho de Deggo.
kii kay solo Ronaldinho de Deggo Moussa.
mais malheureusement li mu bëgg. mu ci xel mi
mais
li mu bëggoon mu ci xel mi.
mais nekkul ci tànk yi.
ndeysaan mu ngi ci dara attaque contrôlé waat na.
ñàkk
on récupéré encore pour le tout nouveau rentrant le numéro 11.
kii
à la roulette à la Zidane manqué. attention fële. attention.
Moussa lii lan la. Moussa lii lan la. Moussa lii lan la. Moussa lii lan la. Moussa lii lan la.
La ilaha illallah.
La ilaha illallah. Moussa lan la.
Bay ñi ba duñu regretté occasion yi ñu
moo ma jaaxal Moussa. Moussa waaye ne lu leen dal roulet bee leen ko yóbbee.
albumbu deba delo.
Moussa bal bi bu duggoon roulet leen ko yóbbee.
albumbu deba delo.
ay Moussa fu nu jëm ak roulet Moussa.
ay waay ala Zidane boobu moo leen.
ay waay Moussa ala Zidane naka
ay ca mooy noonu.
ñu dellu.
ñu dem.
ña ngay doxal.
dégagement de Casemiro.
Casemiro.
le Casemiro de Darou Salam.
de Darou Salam moo dégagé bal bi
la tête encore.
waaw.
tête encore ndaama la tëb na mais mënul mbëkk.
mënul mbëkk Moussa.
mu teg ko loxo.
taayam eggul foofu Moussa.
aja ballon dégagé encore.
ña ngay dem.
et lam nu muy def day mbëkk wala day dóor.
lañ set génn na ko.
mbay lu dal xelam la def fi mu toll.
Moussa déggoo ñu ne mag lu dal xelam moo koy may yaram.
lu dal xelam la def fi mu toll nii.
mag la mu def moo dal xelam Moussa.
ayca mooy noonu tout ça arrêté par Amdi.
ña ngay doxal
son nouveau capitaine mais Mbaye Wadji il a changé complètement le match de Deggo.
wax lii
mais Mbaye Wadji ndekete daa mun.
Wadji footballkat la
aja le centre la tête de Baba.
Moussa Wadji footballkat la
mais Mbaye ndekete Wadji footballkat la.
may la Moussa numéro 10 boo ko solee tamanoo football da ngaa yab équipe bi. numéro 10 boo ko solee tamanoo football da ngaa yab équipe bi.
il a changé complètement le cours du match de Deggo.
yow ma ne
ayca ñu jox ko.
ndaama
gaz bi.
gaz bu ndaw
contrôlé.
gaz bu ndaw
récupéré.
la
ñu dégagé. la tête encore.
ña nga ca.
la tête encore.
arbitre nee na orzo.
et dégagement de Baba mais finalement.
arbitre nee na orzo.
faute la arbitre bi tiré.
arbitre nee na orzo.
faute la tiré faute.
maa ngi nuyu képp kuy seetaan KM Info.
di nuyu ñëpp ñi nga xamante ne ñu ngi commentaire tamit.
waaw. ñi commentaire.
première match bi amut.
waaw parce que daa avorté Moussa. daa avorté.
nu muy avorté nag yow tamit.
avorté mooy lu waroon a am ta amul Moussa.
mais loolu c'est reporté kay xanaa.
reporté avorté c'est reporté rek Moussa.
waaw reporté avorté.
may la avorté mooy lu am lu waru am ta amul. waaw lii nag dañ koo reporté.
mais Mbaye reporté mooy lu waroon a am ta amul.
may la Moussa apporté reporté amul Moussa.
kon nañ ko déggee noonu mooy amul.
ni ma ko waxee noonu la.
amul kon.
match ba amul.
aca mooy noonu ballon récupéré.
ña ngay doxal
récupéré encore waa ji dal na xel lool.
ña ngay doxal Ali
va faire la passe.
kooku
contrôle ba.
Moussa. Moussa mbaa xam nga benn affaire. daa def li gën a jafe rek li gën a yomb Moussa.
lam yaqulu ila abadan.
lil mulki nii.
la mulkina.
la ilaha illallah.
ya Allah.
Moussa foo jànge.
Mbaye man dama demoon naar ya.
Moussa xanaa da ngaa demoon Arabie Saoudi.
dama demoon naar ya.
bu may dellu yóbbaale ma.
bu may njamaar kay di nga dem Mbaye.
la ilaha
ay ñooy noonu Mbaye attention.
ña ngay doxal.
Deggo avait l'occasion de tuer le match.
mais tuyeewul nag.
mais tuyewul kay.
su ma tuwul ñu tuye ko de.
ah loolu laa gën a ragal fi mu toll nii. 3 ou 4 occasions manquées par Deggo.
ma ne la nag ñi ñooy am occasion ne ko ci pays.
Deggo avait l'occasion de tuer le match Mbaye.
mais n'est pas tué le match Moussa.
mais il n'a pas tué ce match jusqu'à présent Mbaye. Deggo mooy poussé noonu.
waaw
attention Darou maintenant.
ña ngay doxal
muy jéem a génn zone am.
waaw
mais mënul génn. parce que ki nga xamante ne.
da koo téye
mooy
Moussa
Deggo daf ko tegal pressing.
da koo
boo xamante ne. fi mu toll nii pour mu génn ci li nga xam ne mooy ligne médiane bi sa problème la.
mais mënoo dugal loolu amul sens Moussa. équipe boo ko tàncee da nga koy dugal Moussa.
ayca ñu joué du côté de Deggo encore.
équipe boo ko tàncee da nga koy dugal.
ñu jox ki nga xam ne moom mooy Youm.
ña nga ca.
Youm pour.
ña ngay doxal.
attention. ballon récupéré da koy contrôler bu génnee corner la waaye waa ji day daw contrôler ko ñu daw encore mu daanu.
Moussa loolan la. Moussa loolan la.
ayca ballon encore Deggo.
Moussa loolan la
da koy jox profondeur bi parce que.
Moussa
mu dem oh dafa bari.
Moussa
c'est trop ça c'est trop. c'est trop ça oh là là.
waay pass ci football la bokk
waay. attention attention.
Moussa pass ci football la bokk.
attention.
Moussa pass ci football la bokk Moussa. Moussa pass ci football la bokk Moussa.
Mbaye xanaa ñu dem xool VAR bi rek.
Moussa ana VAR.
Mbaye xanaa ñu dem xool VAR bi.
Moussa ana VAR.
xanaa ñu dem xooli VAR bi rek.
Moussa fi mu ne stade bi yëpp ay VAR lañu.
xanaa ñu ñëw xool VAR.
Moussa y a beaucoup de VAR dans le stade Moussa.
ndax am na ou amul.
parce que ku nekk yaa ngi commentaire.
xanaa ñu dem xool VAR yi rek ndax am na wala amul.
Moussa y a beaucoup de VAR dans le
mais
stade
trop
Moussa.
d'occasions manquées du côté de Darou Salam du côté de Deggo.
occasion yi bari na te dugalulu Moussa.
Deggo qui domine mais qui ne marque pas.
maa la wax lii.
Deggo.
Moussa Deggo.
qui domine.
mais mënul dugal.
mais qui ne marque pas.
Deggo qui domine. mais qui ne marque pas.
ayca mooy noonu Soso.
mooy noonu.
nee naa ko yàlla nga am jëkkëru footballeur.
bu ko amulee Moussa du baax ci moom.
nga am jëkkëru professionnel pro.
waaw Moussa mbaa mu am jëkkëri coach su Moussa.
mais Soso bëgg na sport.
torop Moussa torop ndeysaan. fi mu nekk nii ku ci nekk yaa ngi consulté wu Moussa.
waaye.
joueurs yi war a waxtaan ñu ngi waxtaan. équipe bu nekk yaa ngi xool nan nga mën a tojee sa bopp jinax ba gagné équipe bi.
ah oui mais c'est normal temps. c'est normal.
waaw loolu mooy yoon match baa ngi waaj a jeex.
temps arrêt de jeu bi fi mu toll nii Darou Salam la arrangé.
waaw waaw.
parce que Darou Salam lañ bousculé woon.
waaw Moussa.
et finalement.
waaw.
Darou Salam la arrangé.
Moussa ñi nga xam ne ñoo yor waa wàllum paj mi Moussa. ñoom boo gaañoo ñoo lay faj te doo fay dara Moussa.
donc voilà mooy noonu.
Moussa Déggen na ngi noonu. Déggen moom moo dirigé waa wàllum paj mi Moussa.
waay.
Déggen jaajëf waay.
donc voilà ñoo ngi noonu.
Déggen merci beaucoup. ci soigné bi.
joueurs yi daanu woon yëpp jug nañ.
waaw ñëpp a jóg nañ. grâce à Déggen.
joueurs yi daanu woon yëpp jug nañ.
Déggen qui a enlevé tous les joueurs Moussa. maa la wax loolu ña ngay doxal Moussa. bal ba jóg na.
ballon récupéré encore.
kan la
du côté de Deggo. joué récupéré du côté de Darou Salam dégagé. Amdi qui va contrôler cette balle dégagé encore. Ballon récupéré. Kali va chercher devant. Attention le contre. Attention.
Darou.
Attention.
Darou.
Ballon pour le gardien.
gardien bi jël na bal bi.
Pour le gardien.
gardien bi jël na bal bi.
Ballon récupéré encore.
waaw. ña ngay doxal.
Attention. ñu dem.
ña ngay doxal Deggo. Deggo
récupéré du côté de Darou.
Darou.
Darou Salam.
Darou doxal.
Kali lu muy def.
Darou doxal.
profondeur bi.
Darou profondeur.
Attention.
profondeur.
Attention.
profondeur la.
mais kii tamit Mbaye.
Moussa lii lan la. ay Moussa lii lan la Moussa.
ay lii kay Mahaza li waaje doon wax ca élection yi Mahaza.
Moussa lii lan la Moussa.
Mahaza.
lii lan la Moussa.
man kay yow laa koy laaj fi mu toll nii.
Moussa lii lan la.
yow laa ko war a laaj.
Moussa lii lan la.
ah oui.
raté na occasion bu rëy Moussa.
attention Deggo. ñu ngi
Daaru. ñu ngay dem.
da ngay appuyer si.
Daaru.
ñu joué Kali encore.
ña ngay dem.
l'auteur du passe magnifique. attention da ngay joxe.
ña ngay dem
contré. Kali encore.
ña ngay dem.
contré. Kali nee na dara amul.
nee na football leen. Ali.
day joxe fële.
ku ko jox.
pour Youm.
Youm.
da koy dindi. da koy dindi.
arbitre.
et c'est une faute.
day
plus carton.
dalay ndawtal dalay ndawtal
loolu carton la.
arbitre bi dalay ndawtal arbitre bi nee naa la ku ko débil mu rokkin la ko Moussa arbitre bi boo ko débilee mu rokkin la ko
loolu carton la.
carton la Moussa loolu par force la ña ngay doxal Moussa yëf yaa ngay dox
loolu carton la.
carton la Moussa moo tax ndawtal na ko Moussa coup franc baa ngi noonu déggoo ñoo ko moom maa ngi nuyu kulli kuy seetaan KM Info les auditeurs et des auditrices de KM Info
ñu ngi lay nuyu bu baax.
ñu ngi leen di nuyu di leen ziare bu wér a wér a wér a wér di leen wax ne fépp foo leen mënti nekk KM Info dina leen fa fekk jox leen ko live yéen ñi nga xam ne mënoo leen a ñëw terrain toog ci seeni salle teg seen warga ak suukar KM Info di leen ko jox vraiment nee nañ bu lekkee olom na ko gërëmee coy KM Info moo leen koy jox fépp fu waay nekk France Espagne Italie États-Unis Angleterre Allemagne ma ne la ba Gambie Guinée waa KM Info dañ leen koy jox fépp fu waay mën a ne rek jàppal KM Info mu la koy jox live moo ngi noonu gaaya teg nañu bal ba
le coup franc.
maa ngi nuyu sama waa ji Saliou Mbeng maa ngi lay nuyu président bisab bi coup franc ba jóg na Moussa
aja ballon joué.
ballon joué li lan la
ça passe à côté.
Moussa lii mooy xalaa ma ndir mbàjj naroon naa jaar fële Saliou Mbeng nuyu naa la président bisab bi nuyu naa la Cheikh ko corner ba tegu na le numéro 8 gaz bu ndaw moo teg coup franc bi Moussa yëkkati na ko mu jóg loolu mooy corner 6 mètres loolu mooy corner 6 mètres Moussa
Mbaye nga ne loolu mooy lan.
le corner devenu 6 mètres Moussa
Mbaye le corner est devenu.
le corner est devenu 6 mètres Moussa
mais loolu am na.
maa la wax loolu la
aja
def
ballon récupéré du côté de Darou Salam.
Moussa maa la wax loolu
et
Moussa
ballon l'avantage c'est par l'arbitre. Et il revient sur la faute. L'arbitre qui revient sur la faute.
arbitre bi dafa wàññeeku waat ci faute bi Moussa
Arbitre qui revient sur la faute.
maa la wax loolu Zal maa ngi jël nuyoo bi di ko teg si yow nga joxal ma ko waa bisaab bi waa ruq bi nee naa leen képp ku bëgg jàmm ak salaam ñëwal ruq ba guddi bisaab guddi attaaya waa bisaab baa ngi noonu maa ngi leen di nuyu di leen siyaare
kon kay foofu war naa faa ñëw Mbaye.
may la Moussa boo bëggee jàmm ñëwal ruq ba Moussa
war naa faa ñëw faj sama tooy bi.
da lay ñam bisaab di la ñam attaaya bu la neexee ñu ñam la keleg bu yëg bisaab boo ñëwee loo bëgg am na fa Moussa maa ngi nuyu Cheikh Bari borom kurus gi.
Aïcha ballon joué rapidement.
Aïcha.
Le numéro 10 le Casemiro de Darou Salam.
Casemiro de Darou.
moo ko tëmbal noonu ballon récupéré par
waaw
Youm.
Youm
et c'est une touche gagnée pour Darou Salam encore.
ma ne ko maa ngi nuyu sama cadreur yi Moussa.
trop de occasions manquées du côté de Deggo.
waaw moo taxit nag Moussa boo dee rate bu yàggee boo pee gars yi am ko ne ko ci pays Moussa.
mu saxaar xeeñ lu neex.
waaw maa la wax loolu. occasion exploitée la ñu wax. occasion bii la sant waay.
Aïcha ballon dégagé du côté de Deggo.
Aïcha
récupéré par le capitaine Casemiro.
Casemiro
il va jouer avec Lam.
Lam.
Lam harcelé ñaari ndaama la.
ñu ngay dem
ku juum daanu.
waaw maa la wax loolu
Aïcha moo ngi noonu.
Aïcha
day dem encore.
ma ngay dem
day dem traversé na terrain bi.
arbitre nee na faute la faute la bàyyil arbitre bi bala mu laa ndawtal.
arbitre nee na faute.
bàyyil arbitre bi bala mu laa ndawtal bàyyi ko mu dem.
arbitre nee na faute.
arbitre nee na faute bu xasee tiire mënoo leen ci dara demal wuti waat coup franc bi daaroo ko moom Moussa waa daaru ñoo moom coup franc bi noonu. coup franc bi daaroo
sera
ko
joué
moom
par le numéro 11
de Darou Salam.
de Darou Salam.
ñoo ko teg noonu ma fàttali leen ne un but partout.
Aïcha
coup franc bi jóg na Moussa.
pour qui.
pour kan.
dégagement encore.
corner.
Mbaye am nga fii boo deful ndànk bal bi du daw génn.
waaw
day bonde rek taxaw.
day bonde taxaw Moussa nga
loolu
yaakaar ne
moo nax xanaa moo nax défenseur bi.
waaw moo
ba
ko
mu def li nga xam ne mooy penalty bi.
moo ngi noonu coup franc bi corner bi Darou Salam ko moom Darou Salam ñoo moom coup franc bi fase corner bi fase ni ko
Aïcha yàlla ba mu nekk corner simet.
looloo ma jaaxal comme bi
Aïcha
amoon
corner.
corner ba jóg na
corner.
corner ba jóg na
encore dégagé. faute.
arbitre nee na faute.
c'est une faute.
waaw Deggo ñoo ko moom Moussa.
Deggo moo ko moom.
waaw on joue rapidement. wala
un but partout.
un but partout ndam demul ndam dikkul.
li ndaw si di bañ.
waaw ndam demul ndam dikkul.
ma ne Mbaye loolu nga wax moom la ndaw si di bañ ci TikTok
waaw
bi.
ndaw si lu tax mu bañ loolu Moussa.
ndam demul ndam dikkul.
ndam demul ndam dikkul loolu lu mu.
ay ca laam mooy kon
laam
Mbaye
lañ set.
laam moo konte noonu.
lañ set.
arbitre nee na faute.
lañ set. arbitre nee na faute tegal.
arbitre nee na faute am na.
déggal loolu. teg na ko Moussa.
arbitre nee na faute am na.
arbitre nee na faute am na Moussa. numéro 10 bi moo langaamu lañ set Moussa.
il a dégagement.
waaw dégagé nañ ko.
Kali qui va contrôler.
Kali.
et la fin du match.
arbitre bi nee na match bi jeex na. ñu wax leen ne lii moo fi jot a am. seen première match bi première heure. ci diggante Deggo ak Darou Salam. ndam demul ndam dikkul 1 but partout. waa KM Info ñoo leen ko doon jox live en direct nii.
et c'est la fin du match.
c'est la fin du match ci diggante Darou Salam ak Deggo. on se donne rendez-vous ba ci kanam. di leen wax ne gars yi à tout à l'heure. Moussa à tout à l'heure.
donc voilà mooy noonu.
waaw.
gars yi mooy noonu premier match joué.
waaw.
entre Darou Salam ak ki nga xamante ne moom mooy équipe bi nga xam ne mooy Deggo.
Deggo ak Darou Salam.
un but partout.
ndam demul ndam dikkul.
moom la ndaw si di bañ waaye ñun moom la ñu am fii.
looloo fi am sax Moussa.
ndam demul ndam dikkul.
wallaay Moussa looloo leer. maa ngi nuyu suñu am di jàmm yëpp Moussa.
kenn gañewul sa morom.
déedéet kenn gañewul.
bay xoolal waa Deggo ak waa Darou Salam supporters yi.
waaw.
ñoo bu jugee buun gis nga leen ñooy ànd ñooy ñibbi lii mooy sport.
waaye Moussa le sport c'est ça. le sport c'est fair play. sport bu demee ba am saaga. mbaa mu am dóor. mbaa mu am xuloo. doonatul sport leneen la Moussa.
gis nga leen ñoo jugee ndoo seen buun.
xoolal ñoo ngi nee di waxtaan Moussa.
ñooy àndandoo ñibbi waat seen buun.
supporter bu nekk.
ñoom ñooy waxtaan.
Moussa. Moussa lii rek dafa neex Moussa.
ah oui.
Moussa lii dafa neex. Moussa lii dafa neex Moussa. yéen a ànd ñëw yéen a àndaat dellu. dara dàqul lii. Moussa boo déggee maye la nawetaan.
waaw.
jarul xuloo jarul xeex. da ngay gis jour bu jóge sànce ba. dem fubali beneen équipe. jóge beneen équipe ñëw fubal si sànce ba. sport la fu neex waay far. nit ku nekk demal fa nga sentir. waaye lépp na commencé si jàmm. jeexee si jàmm. loolu bu dee am rek incha allahu rabbi lépp luñ ci bëgg te sumb ko ci yàlla suñu borom dinañu ko àggaleel.
waaye Mbaye sport daa war a boole ay nit.
waaw mais warul séparé.
sport daa war a boole ay nit.
billaay daa war a boole mais warul séparé.
warul tàqale ay nit.
non bu tàqalee rek doonatul sport.
bu ñu demee ba sport wala tàqale ay nit nekkatul sport.
leneen la.
moo tax ñoom ñaari gi bi joué nañ ci fair play.
waaw.
joué nañ ci discipline.
waaw.
ndam demul ndam dikkul.
dëgg la.
léegi nag ñu ngi leen di jox rendez-vous ci deuxième heure bi.
waaw deuxième heure bi lañ leen di joxaat dig daje. ci kanam tuuti ñu joxaat leen deuxième heure.
ayca mooy noonu.
ci fii nga xamante ne nii.
ñu dem dikk rek.
waaw.
yàqul dara si réew mi.
I'm joined now by the founder of Democracy Defenders Fund, Norm Eisen. Norm, you have just proven yourself a major thorn in Donald Trump's side, blowing a huge hole in a plan that he had since day one of his administration. Can you explain what you just did in court?
We just secured the certification of a nationwide class of plaintiffs and a preliminary injunction that Donald Trump's denial of the Constitution, which says that all persons born in the United States are citizens, is unconstitutional. From the beginning of his administration, the very first day, he signed an executive order saying, no, the 14th Amendment, all persons born here are citizens. That only applied to the children of slaves back when it was passed after the Civil War. No, that's not what it says at all. It says all persons born in the United States. A cornerstone of his administration and his hatred is the scapegoating. We see that with authoritarians everywhere in the world. They always pick a scapegoat. Donald Trump is targeting migrants.
Yep.
And together with our partners in this case, the ACLU, the nation's oldest and largest Latino civil rights group, LULAC, the NAACP, LDF, Legal Defense Fund, and so many other wonderful partners, we have secured this injunction. And we've put Donald Trump back in his corner. He thought the Supreme Court let him off 2 weeks ago. We've shown him that still no one is above the law.
So basically, this was a situation where Trump thought that he had carte blanche to be able to move forward with his unlawful plans, his unconstitutional plans, because he watched the Supreme Court say, in deference to him, that there can be no nationwide injunction. So one court somewhere can't look at a blatantly unlawful order handed down by the Trump administration and say, no, you can't do that, and this injunction applies to the whole country. And so he thought he got a win, but now your lawsuit basically pushed back on that and said, okay, if we can't have nationwide injunctions, we can still have class action lawsuits, and so let's find everybody impacted by birthright citizenship and say that they are part of the same class of protected people, which effectively has the exact same result as what a nationwide injunction would be. Is that correct?
That's right, Brian. About 2 weeks ago in the CASA case, the Supreme Court closed one door and said just plain old nationwide injunctions, where a judge says you violated the 14th Amendment, I'm going to issue an injunction covering the country. No, but they opened another door. They said the way to do that is to go to court, have a class, that means a similarly situated representative group of plaintiffs who stand for people across the country, get your class certified. The court says, yes, that is a class, I'm accepting it, and then get a preliminary injunction that way. Well, within 2 hours of that Supreme Court decision, ourselves and the ACLU and LULAC and the LDF and our other wonderful partners and our wonderful clients, the children who have been born since February 20th or who are the parents of the children who are going to be born, those are the clients here. And with our wonderful clients, we were back in court a little over 2 hours later. We asked the judge to go fast. He did. And here we are with this certification of our class and this injunction, just like the Supreme Court invited.
Right. And it's also worthwhile to move quickly because otherwise you have babies born who are literally stateless. And that is not a tenable position here. So is this retroactive to are there any babies that were born before this court ruling was handed down that are effectively stateless, who were born to undocumented immigrants that were still like under the, I guess, temporary jurisdiction of Trump's executive order?
Well, there's issues about the timing of the executive order. Trump claims it doesn't kick in for 30 days after the Supreme Court decision, but the court was leaving nothing to chance. It did issue a retroactive injunction that goes back to the end of that original 30-day period, which is February 20th. So the injunction is for all children born after February 20th, 2025, coast to coast, who are born of where one parent was a an undocumented migrant. The other parent might have citizenship, but perhaps not permanent citizenship. Any child where there could be a question, do they have birthright citizenship? They are protected by this injunction. Now we're going to have to continue to fight appeals. But as you know, we can't have a crazy quilt that a baby in one county is protected because a judge there happened to issue an injunction. And then next door, a baby is born that's not protected. We need a uniform plan. Brian, I certainly haven't agreed with everything this Roberts court has done, but there's a consistent pattern where they close one door and they open another one. They make it a little tougher, but with hard work, you're able to deliver for the Constitution, for the clients. For example, remember the Abrego Garcia case. Lower court judge said the government must facilitate and effectuate the return of Abrego. No, the Supreme Court said you must facilitate, effectuate, that's too much. They compromised. Well, guess what? Abrego's lawyers had to work a little hard. The Trump administration said, oh, we're never bringing him back. Today, Abrego is back on U.S. soil and fighting, utilizing the courts, utilizing his due process rights. So same thing here. The court made it a little tougher. Roberts court made it a little tougher, but they did open that door. We walked through it. In fact, 2 hours after the Supreme Court's ruling, we ran through that door to protect the rights of these babies. All babies born in the United States are citizens of the United States. My parents were migrants. Every person here comes of migrant stock, except for the Native Americans. And so this is the idea of America in action, and we're very proud that we secured that first injunction.
Now, Norm, it's worth asking here that normally when you have a federal district court, their rulings don't establish any precedent. But isn't it true that now that this is a class action lawsuit, the only people impacted are not those who are in this specific case? This is class action, and so this is the entire country. Everybody who falls into this class across the entirety of the United States is protected by this ruling. Is that correct?
That's exactly right, Brian. Normally, when a federal district court, the trial court rules, that binds that individual judge, and other judges in that district may or may not agree with that first opinion. It's not until the appellate courts and ultimately the Supreme Court get involved that precedent is more broadly binding. But this is following what the Supreme Court said less than 2 weeks ago, making such news in the CASA case, that the way to get a nationwide injunction and bind everyone in the country, every baby born here in the period the judge applied this to after February 20th, is through class action. And that's what we did. We got the class certified. That means the judge said, yes, it's a proper class. It represents all the babies. And we got the injunction based on that class certification. Now we'll have appeals here. But we think we're on firm footing. We did what the Supreme Court asked. Donald Trump's reading of the Constitution on birthright citizenship is ridiculous. He says it only applies to the children of slaves. It says very clearly, all persons. This is an originalist court. They say follow the words and the original meaning. That is clearly the meaning. The court has held as much for the entire history of this 14th Amendment. And we're confident that we are going to succeed on appeal.
If this gets to the Supreme Court, I know nothing is a sure thing, but it was the Supreme Court itself that left open the option to make use of these class action lawsuits. And so is there a world where the Supreme Court can say, we know we gave you this remedy, but in fact, we don't want you to employ this remedy? Like that seems complete, even for this court, seems completely outside the realm of possibility. Can you weigh in on that?
We have to be candid about the challenges that we faced, and to take strong exception to some of the decisions of the Roberts Court on Trump's imperial and unconstitutional uses of executive power. I would point all your listeners to Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's magnificent dissents, explaining why we disagree with some of the rulings of the Roberts Court. But even this court is confronted with a long line of precedent that class actions are acceptable, and with the plain language of the 14th Amendment, all persons born here are citizens of the United States. So even the Roberts Court is going to be hard pressed to disagree with what the judge did today, and what I think many other judges are going to do as these cases, these class actions, are also brought elsewhere in the country. We're expecting another decision in Maryland any day now. Of course, this case, before it was a class action, was the very first to be filed anywhere in the country, challenging Trump's unconstitutional attack on birthright citizenship back on January 20th. We filed it as soon as he did that EO, and then we did the same thing after the Supreme Court ruled that you had to have a class action. We went to court a couple hours later, raced, and now we have got the class certified, and we've got that preliminary injunction protecting all the babies. If there's one thing we should all be for, it's American babies, Brian. And that's what the Constitution establishes, a class of all babies born here. They're Americans. That's the American idea. And that is what we defended and secured in court today.
Well, look, I will always happy to give a platform to the people who are fighting, especially those who are fighting on the front lines. And you and your team at Democracy Defenders Fund and all of the other groups and other co-counsel that were involved in this case are chief among them. So highly recommend for anybody watching, if you're looking to support the work that Democracy Defenders Fund is doing, which is fighting this battle on the front lines. I'll put the link to that right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're listening on the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. Norm, appreciate the work that you're doing and the time that you have today.
Brian, it's been so meaningful to me as you and I have traveled on this journey of Trump's autocratic overreach, but the pushback, including in the courts and by the rule of law. We've had so many of these conversations with your wonderful viewers and listeners, and we're on this journey together. We're going to protect the Constitution. We're going to protect all the American babies. And we're going to end this autocratic nightmare together.
Norm, thanks again. You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, I want to turn your attention to some reporting that has completely surged into the national spotlight here about Epstein, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi. So I'm going to put a paragraph from Axios right up here on the screen. FBI Director Dan Bongino took a day off of work on Friday after clashing at the White House with Attorney General Pam Bondi over their handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. 4 sources familiar with the conflict told Axios. It also goes on to say that Bongino didn't come to work Friday, leading some insiders to believe he had quit, but administration officials say he's still on the job, even as the internal tension over the Epstein case continues. So as it relates to this whole saga that continues to unfold, can I have your reaction to this reporting that we just saw?
Yeah, Brian, so first of all, dissension and disarray inside the Trump administration. Who could have seen that coming with rock solid characters like Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, really? So, here's the thing. The Epstein story has been taking up a lot of oxygen, and it's not just because folks on the left are interested. It's because MAGA world has exploded because they feel like maybe they've been lied to. I mean, let's face it. We saw this question asked by one of the Fox network anchors of Attorney General Pam Bondi. What about the Epstein client list? And she said, it's on my desk, with the only logical inference being, it is about to be released. That was what the Trump administration was signaling over and over again until there's no client list, which makes no damn sense. You wonder just how gullible some of, MAGA world can be. But now it looks like there is a blow up between Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, perhaps Kash Patel. and I read the Axios reporting, and I have to tell you, this is probably my favorite part of that reporting. They said, and this is quoting sources who appeared to be part of this meeting, quote, Pam said her piece, Dan said his piece. It didn't end on friendly terms, said one person briefed on the heated discussion. Bongino left angry, the source said, and the reporting is he just didn't show up for work the next day because, why would thousands of FBI agents need the deputy director to actually come to work if he's a little bit ticked off? This whole thing is, I think the legal term I would use, a shit show, and it goes to show that there are these juveniles who are in charge of things inside the Trump administration. And the last place, Brian, you want juveniles to be in charge is a place like the FBI or the Department of Justice.
Okay, so here's the thing that I'm having a lot of trouble with, because within the right-wing media ecosystem, there's a lot of consternation, mostly focused at Pam Bondi. But we've seen the extent to which Pam Bondi has contracted every ounce of her autonomy over to Trump. And so I guess I would pose the question to you, granted, with the caveat, of course, that this is all just, our opinion here. But to what extent do you think that the buck stops with Pam Bondi versus the buck stopping with Donald Trump, who, of course, is above her and who has a little bit of conflicts of interest here in terms of the fact that there are tons of video and photos of him with Epstein. Epstein, of course, called Donald Trump his closest friend for 10 years. And so, there's obviously an incentive for Donald Trump to want to bury this stuff. But going back to the question, who is most responsible here? Is it Pam Bondi, as a lot of these folks are saying, or is it someone above Pam Bondi?
Yeah, well, first of all, Donald Trump coined a new presidential phrase, if you remember, some years ago when he said, and I quote, "No, I don't take responsibility at all." That's not exactly what we expect or need in a president of the United States. But it doesn't seem like anything Donald Trump says or does, no matter, how obvious the lie, no matter how inconsistent he is from day to day, none of it seems to stick to him as far as MAGA world is concerned. So if MAGA world needs to be upset with somebody for the Epstein debacle, and I don't mean the crimes Epstein committed, I mean the debacle that is the way the Department of Justice and the FBI is presently handling all this, they're either going to blame it on Bondi, or if it's more convenient, they'll blame it on Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who seem to be on the other side of things. Because remember, when they were podcasters, they were apparently all in on the conspiracy theory and demanding things be released. And now it seems like there is a split between Bondi and perhaps Patel and Bongino. But it seems like the buck never stops with Donald Trump, and his base, his supporters, will never deign to criticize him or disagree with him, regardless of how, transparently false or ridiculous, whatever he's saying is. So if there's going to be a scapegoat, it's going to be Pam Bondi. And if there is any pressure, and Donald Trump feels the pressure, does anybody think that Pam Bondi won't be introduced to the undercarriage of a bus?
Right. It's the perfect point. And we've spoken about this before, the extent to which Donald Trump has no allegiance to anybody other than himself, in the same way that he's discarded Kayleigh McEnany and Michael Cohen and George Papadopoulos and Gordon Sondland and Ronna McDaniel. He will continue to discard people the moment they lose their political usefulness. Pam Bondi is a placeholder. She is there to serve as an extension, an appendage of Donald Trump. And I guess if she pushes back in any way, there's a long line of people who are happy to take that job, who will toe the line, whatever line Donald Trump puts forward. And so to dig into the question that I just asked, then, we're in a world where, do you think that this anger toward Pam Bondi is misguided? Because at the end of the day, this is not a scenario where we have an independent FBI director. This is a scenario, gone are the days where Bill Clinton speaking with Loretta Lynch, on a tarmac for 3 minutes was enough to create a national scandal. Now, Donald Trump is basically telling Pam Bondi in broad daylight what she should and should not be investigating or prosecuting. He's gone in front of the DOJ and offered up a list of names, including Mark Elias, in terms of people that he would like to see investigated or who he feels wronged him in some way. And so is this focus on Pam Bondi misguided?
I don't think it is, and God help me if I'm going to say, looking at this from the MAGA perspective. But here's the thing, there has been this outcry. We want to see the Epstein files. We want to see the Epstein client list. And I guess that's on probably the mistaken belief that there's going to be, nothing but Democrats on that list? Yeah. I am hard-pressed to believe that's the case. So I do think the wrath that is being directed at Pam Bondi is frankly well-placed, because when on one day, when she's asked, what are you going to do with the client list? She says, it's on my desk. Inferentially, we're about to release it all.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, not only have we found reason not to release it, but it doesn't even exist. That thing that I said was on my desk just days ago. Listen,
right.
I think she deserves all the incoming wrath that she's getting.
Right. I mean, I guess they're not mutually exclusive, right? If Donald Trump is handing down edicts to Pam Bondi, then sure, he's responsible, but she's got agency too. And no one forced her to go out in February and promise that she was going to look at the Epstein client list that was on her desk later on that day, only for her to come out now and spew some bullshit as to why she wasn't doing that. She is still the Attorney General of the United States. And yes, all of these people might be under the thumb of Donald Trump, but that doesn't mean that they are without agency. It certainly doesn't mean that they are without responsibility for what they themselves do, for how they comport themselves.
Yeah, Brian,
so,
let me say this. So this is my speculation, but kind of reading all of these players, I have a feeling if it came down to, having to, introduce Kash Patel and Dan Bongino to the undercarriage of the bus, or throw Pam Bondi under the bus, Pam Bondi has been sending DOJ lawyers into court day after day after day on legal suicide missions. These people must not care one whit about their law licenses, because she is sending them off to court to argue that Donald Trump's lawlessness is actually lawful, that Donald Trump's unconstitutional executive orders are actually constitutional, and these attorneys are getting raked up and down because of the positions they're taking, which are laughable. So I have a feeling Donald Trump will remain all in with Pam Bondi, because, no legitimate attorney, and certainly no career DOJ prosecutor, attorney, or official could look at what Pam Bondi's doing and conclude that she has any concern for the ethics of the Department of Justice or the people that she's sending into court day after day. So why would Donald Trump want to give that up?
Right. Glenn, you worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. for decades. I know that it's not the same as the FBI, but if given your experience, if you had a situation like this where you've got, the FBI director and the deputy FBI director who had predicated so much of their identity, their support, their online brand, in this pursuit of justice as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein, of accountability for the people who Jeffrey Epstein was associated with, and then there was a failure to release any of this information that was promised, and then all of a sudden you have the deputy FBI director who refused to show up for work. What would you and your colleagues be saying if you were in these offices while this was playing out?
Well, I can tell you how we did handle, let's call them dust-ups, between the federal prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office and the agents and the special agents or the leadership at the FBI. We worked most closely with WFO, the Washington Field Office of the FBI, which is just a few blocks away from headquarters. Headquarters is largely the land where the bureaucrats dwell, and the Washington Field Office is where the working agents were that we, handled RICO cases with, among others. What we would make sure we did is we would keep our dust-ups and disagreements behind closed doors. We would work through them. Listen, any organization, any, members of a team who have to work under really high-pressure circumstances, when the stakes are very high, sometimes in murder and gang and RICO cases, it can be life and death. You're going to have dust-ups, you're going to have disagreements, and they're going to get heated sometimes, and they're going to get loud. But what you don't do is sort of let it all leak out so it can be on full display for the public, because the public might misunderstand those kind of dust-ups and disagreements as, you know, showing that they should have a lack of confidence in one or both of those agencies, federal prosecutor, U.S. Attorney's Office, and the FBI, when that's really not the case. I think dust-ups, disagreements, as long as they're professional and they're all coming from a place of ethics and allegiance to the rule of law and the Constitution, are not necessarily a bad thing, because you're going to get to a better consensus decision at the end of the day. But, you know, when I see this nonsense about how these people are behaving, and then Dan Bongino, I don't know whether it was a scheduled leave day or he just decided in a huff not to come to work as the deputy director of the FBI. That is embarrassing, and I think that does erode confidence to the extent anybody has any reason to be confident in the FBI leadership today. I think it tends to erode confidence.
Yeah. All right. Well, if we have any update on this saga as it continues to play itself out, and look, it does not seem like it's going away as quickly as Donald Trump or the rest of the leadership in the DOJ or the FBI are hoping that it will, then we'll, of course, bring it to you. For those who are watching right now, if you'd like to support our work and follow along, the best way to do that is to subscribe to our channels. It is completely free and the perfect way to support independent media. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Some bombshell news here. As the Trump administration keeps wishing the Epstein story away, Wired has just come out with a devastating expose suggesting that the DOJ's so-called raw surveillance footage from Epstein's prison cell may have actually been modified using professional editing software. According to Wired, metadata embedded in the video and analyzed by Wired and independent video forensics experts showed that rather than being a direct export from the prison surveillance system, the footage was modified, likely using the professional editing software Adobe Premiere Pro. The file appears to have been assembled from at least 2 source clips, saved multiple times, exported, and then uploaded on the DOJ's website, where it was presented as raw footage. So when Pam Bondi's DOJ told us that it was full raw surveillance footage proving Epstein killed himself, that certainly doesn't seem to be able to support its own weight. This isn't raw footage. It has been manipulated, edited, and reconstructed, and that's not even counting the missing minute that jumps from 11:58 p.m. to 12 o'clock a.m., which has conspiracy theorists rightfully asking, what the hell happened during that lost minute? But here's what makes this whole thing infinitely worse. Trump, Bondi, Patel, and Bongino are now facing a massive backlash from their own MAGA base for completely screwing all of this up.
Do you believe that DOJ and FBI right now, with the guys who are all close to Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, do you think they have any credibility left to pursue this?
No, and I'll tell you exactly why, Steve, because in 2016, we trusted the plan with Trump. But now Trump has become the deep state. The exact thing we voted him in.
Why do you say he's become the deep state?
What is more deep state than covering up for pedophiles? Why would you go to that island? Why? Tell me, why would you go to that island?
It's insulting our intelligence. Like, obviously the intelligence community is trying to cover it up. Obviously the Trump administration is trying to cover up. Something changed, because they ran on this idea of exposing it all. All these guys had great ideas. Cockeyed Kash, Dan Bongino.
He had clips, dog. He had bars.
He was ready to tear it all down. He was ready to tear down the entire FBI office.
Shut down the Hoover building day one.
Day one.
That bitch still standing.
And then he goes on Joe Rogan and he's like, listen, do you think if I had it, I wouldn't share it with you?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I do believe that 100%, especially when you're staring at me like this, telling me that.
How cockeyed is he? You've said this a few times. Can we get a photo of him really quick?
Once you protect pedophiles, you are the most cockeyed person in the entire world. I never called him cockeyed Kash before this.
He couldn't see all the other people raping the children. He could only see Epstein.
He's just staring at the bridge of his nose. Like, I don't see anything over here. I watched all 3,000 hours of footage.
Yo, maybe I'm wrong on this, but okay, you keep talking about this Epstein. They keep talking about this Epstein list. I got the list on my desk. Now they're saying nothing happened. So one of two things, in my mind, is it possible. One, you're covering it up. Or two, nothing really happened and you exploited the of thousands of children to get your man elected. So which one do you want here?
The timing of it, come on, just seems, come on. It seems like I'll take how do we get the attention off of Epstein for 500, please, Alex.
I hope this story breaking today isn't just a cover story or diversion from the giant fiasco with the FBI and DOJ doing a 180 on Epstein.
So that's it? No client list? Epstein killed himself? No further investigations? Case closed?
Hey, we're going to do an investigation. Now, we can't tell you about the investigation because it's under investigation, so we can't actually talk about the investigation of the people that are being investigated, but they're under investigation.
We don't rise and fall with Trump. We need him. It's a historic thing that's happening. But that said, I'm not breaking my integrity or my morals or what I stand for nobody.
And frankly, these people are right to feel used and lied to. Pam Bondi told Fox News in February that Epstein's client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now to review. She invited right-wing influencers to the White House and handed them binders marked The Epstein Files Phase 1 and promised a truckload of evidence that would blow this case wide open. She said there were, quote, tens of thousands of videos that would expose the truth. And what did we get? Nothing. Literally nothing. This week, the DOJ released a memo saying there is no client list, and also that Epstein died by suicide, and also that they're not releasing any more documents. If you dare ask about it, by the way, well, this is the freakout that will follow.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration.
Yeah, how dare anybody ask about the thing that half of Trump's cabinet predicated their entire brands on? Why are you still harping on stuff from the past? Now, where were we? Oh, right, the Biden crime family. And look, I obviously have no insight into the truth about a client list, but these disillusioned MAGA fans are not wrong to be pissed off based on what they've been told for months and years. Whether you believe in Epstein conspiracy theories or not, the Trump administration clearly lied about what they had and what they could deliver. Kash Patel spent years on his podcast questioning the official Epstein narrative. Dan Bongino built his brand pushing conspiracy theories about Epstein's death. But the moment they got into the federal government, the moment they had the opportunity to actually substantiate the very claims that they spent so long making, they completely flipped.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file.
What's worse, we now know that there's been internal fighting about this disaster. According to Axios today, Bongino and Bondi had a heated clash at the White House over their handling of the Epstein case. Bongino was reportedly so angry he took off the day from work today, with some reporting suggesting that he's considering resigning over the Epstein fallout. Sources say that he was increasingly displeased with Bondi's handling of the Epstein case because she had publicly overpromised and underdelivered. So here's the bottom line. The administration promised transparency and delivered deception. They promised the truth and delivered edited videos. They promised to drain the swamp, and instead, they have become part of it. Whether you think Epstein was murdered or killed himself, whether you believe that his client list exists or not, the fact remains that Donald Trump's team lied about what evidence they had and what they could release. They built up expectations that they knew they couldn't meet, and now they are facing the consequences from their own base. Bondi's excuse that she was talking about the file instead of a client list is pathetic. Bongino and Patel's suddenly conversion from conspiracy theorists to establishment defenders is laughable. And Trump's frustrated response of, "Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?" shows that he knows this is a political loser for him. The edited video is just the latest proof point that we can't trust a word coming out of this administration. That when they claim that something is raw footage, it's been manipulated. When they promise transparency, they deliver cover-ups. When they pledge to fight for the truth, they've become the very swamp creatures that they claim to oppose. The MAGA base is finally seeing what the rest of us have seen all along, that Trump and his team will say anything to win power, and that they'll betray anyone, including their own supporters, once they actually have it. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching.
Let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed. And they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them. But I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them.
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, that was Alan Dershowitz, who was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer when he was back alive, claiming that there are documents, but they're being suppressed. And so I wanted to discuss with you this idea of if there is any information in the federal government that might be floating around, is there anything that could be in place that might prevent that information from being exposed to the public?
Sure. So, it's hard to know what to make of Alan Dershowitz or anything he said around this. But if in fact there is a court order, then there can be restrictions on what's released. I mean, we have seen lots of cases, some involving the current president when he was facing criminal charges, where things are under seal. Right. Remember, there was all that litigation in the Florida case where, there was stuff that was confidential or classified. That's one reason why something might not be released. But judges can put things under seal more generally, even if it's not, classified, but that where there's a good reason. And then they're just not on the public record and the parties are not free to release them. Now, whether the Department of Justice could go back to a judge and say this should no longer be under seal, sure. And that would not be unusual for DOJ to do. If DOJ wants it unsealed, typically judges are going to listen to DOJ because it's usually something is put under seal or kept under court order from being released to protect either one of the parties. In this case, Mr. Epstein is deceased, and so that would leave the Department of Justice, or because the department thinks that the release of it would be prejudicial to other cases or to the interests of the government. So it is possible. I don't know if it's true, but it is definitely possible. And then the keys would be in the hands of Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and people in her government.
So if I'm understanding, really the biggest impediment to releasing any information that may be under seal would be the DOJ itself. I mean, if this is kind of the thing, like if Pam Bondi, if this federal government, if the Trump administration wanted to do it, in theory, they would be able to at least make an effort to make that a reality. Is that correct?
Yeah, and they would be able to make it a reality. I mean, I don't want to put this hurdle up too tall. Okay, the DOJ, this is a closed criminal case. Okay, this is a case in which the Department of Justice holds all of the cards. The only person who would be able to express an opinion that would be contrary to theirs, like I said, is deceased. So if the Department of Justice said, we want to release all these files, whether they would have to go and get a box checked by a federal judge or not, I don't know. It would depend, but it wouldn't be a lot more than getting the box checked by a federal judge. I mean, right. the Department of Justice holds all of the videotape of the jail, and that's totally up to them. They would have all of the records that they collected as part of the grand jury and criminal investigation. If there were any of those that were still subject to some seal order, they could get that lifted. If there were records that they had that were subject to some other settlement or whatever, again, same thing. And it is unlikely that there would be records in the possession of private parties that they wouldn't already have or couldn't get. So, you know, I can already hear people saying, but what if it was part of a private settlement between the parties? Yeah, except a private party settlement can restrict documents from being in the possession of other private parties, but not the U.S. government. The U.S. government can always get access to those records.
So just as a general question here, if you do have an NDA that prevents you from being able to speak out about a topic, is the federal government able to come in and kind of like Bigfoot that NDA?
Absolutely.
And
when people
compel
talk about
the release of information?
Absolutely. When people talk about there being non-disclosure agreements, which is what an NDA is, let's say, you know, you and your employer settle a claim, or you just have an NDA at work, the Department of Justice can issue a grand jury subpoena, and that supersedes any NDA, which is why I'm saying, like, there may be some boxes along the way that have to be checked because that could be put under a protective order with what DOJ does with that information. But let's just assume for a moment a case goes to trial, then like that information will be heard in open court. Like, you know, I mean, they may do some stuff to protect some names. We saw that actually in the criminal trial in New York. Involving Diddy, where, you know, there were some folks testifying under pseudonyms and the like. But again, that is all within the ambit of the prosecutor's office, right? If the prosecutor said, we don't want there to be anonymity for this person testifying, like DOJ, you know, there wouldn't be anonymity. So Pam Bondi has all of the cards here.
Now, there has been a lot of focus on Pam Bondi. I might be alone in thinking this, but it seems so outside the realm of logic and possibility that Pam Bondi is where the buck stops in this situation. I understand she's the Attorney General, she's at the top of the DOJ, but there is no daylight between her and Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump wants something done, he lets it be known. I mean, he went to the Department of Justice and railed against you, you know, in front of these prosecutors. So the wall that would normally be erected between the executive branch or the presidency and the Attorney General and the DOJ has been eliminated. And so if Trump wanted this to move forward, wouldn't it lend itself to reason that he's really where the buck stops and not necessarily Pam Bondi?
Oh, absolutely. And for two reasons, actually. One is the very practical reason that you just said, which is in this administration, Donald Trump has told Pam Bondi to do a lot of things, and she does them.
She does them, right.
And so if he said, you know, release all of the records, not just some of the records relating to Jeffrey Epstein, like, she would release all the records. So that's like the most direct reason. But there's actually a second reason, which is that where you have these closed criminal investigations, where you have deceased parties, presidents actually do that. I mean, you know, there's been talk about that over the years about the release of the JFK files, right? And so, you know, ultimately the president of the United States, where, you know, it wouldn't really be interference in the traditional sense to order the release of a closed file.
Trump is doing it. Trump is at the same time that he's preventing or that we would assume he's preventing some release of these files that presumably he would have the authority to release. He's also ordering the release of the JFK files. So he's proving in real time that he has the authority to do it if he wants to.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, the president can always say to the Attorney General, look, this is a historical matter. This is not, there's no ongoing criminal case, right? Jeffrey Epstein is dead.
Right.
JFK is, you know, dead. Lee Harvey Oswald is dead. Like there is historical reasons why I, as president, think it is in the public interest to release these files. And sure, they would go through a classification review, but there's not going to be anything classified in the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Right.
And even if in a classified case, the president could waive the classification review, right? But so there's no reason why Donald Trump could not say to Pam Bondi, look, there's a lot swirling around this. And I think it is in the public's interest for them to have all the facts, and then it would all be laid out there in public. And that is both, like I said, because that wouldn't be that unusual. I mean, it's an unusual case for the president to have found interesting, but honestly, it was an unusual case for him to have found interesting when he was a candidate. So it would make sense for him to do it if that's what he wanted.
There was reporting today in Axios that suggested that Dan Bongino might be looking to resign, that he didn't come to work today on Friday as deputy director of the FBI. That reporting was confirmed by CNN, which said that in fact they have heard from their sources that Dan Bongino is looking to resign amid the fallout from all of the Epstein stuff. And so, can I have your reaction just in general to the Bongino of it all, because this was somebody who predicated so much of his identity, so much of his brand on talking about this issue in particular. And of course, now you've got that guy, really that at least to his audience seems like the very deep state that he spent so long castigating when he was just a podcast host.
Yeah, look, there are sort of two levels of question here, right? The first is, did he feel like things he said before he was in government were overly aggressive and not borne out by the facts, and does he now feel the need to resign for that? That strikes me as remarkably improbable. I mean, this is an administration full of people who said the most irresponsible things when they were not in government.
Right.
And they are not like the kind to now be like, oh my God, I was wrong, so I must resign in shame.
Right.
Like, this is an administration without shame. So I don't think that's it, right? But that would be like, the one possibility. The other is that, he staked a lot of credibility on this. You have the Attorney General saying that she is reviewing files, including a client list, on her desk, and now she's saying it doesn't exist.
Right.
I don't know whether it exists or doesn't exist. There is a suggestion I saw in the media that there might be a gap in some of the videotape, and that there might be metadata to suggest that the videotape of the jail cell or the prison,
was
that
manipulated.
Manipulator or there are alterations to. And he may just say, you know what, like, I didn't sign up for this because I can't square what is not coming out with what I said needs to come out.
Right.
Now, that would also suggest that there is some, shred of integrity in a weird way. So I don't know whether to credit that either. But I will say that, the administration had an opportunity, if there was no there, to very clearly put to rest that there was no there. And They have managed to either be the most incompetent people at putting to rest a rumor, or there is some weird thing that is out there that they don't want to release. I mean, the president interjecting himself. I don't know if you saw the video of this the other day.
Let's throw to that video.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Okay, that's just like bizarre. I mean, it's bizarre behavior by this president to act that way. I mean, it's contrary to the way he has talked about this issue before, and it seemed, out of character.
Well, and also for Donald Trump, just as a quick aside, for Donald Trump, like, as if he's the guy that doesn't want to relitigate topics. We've been talking about crooked Hillary for the better part of a decade. We've been talking about the Biden crime family for the last, 5-6 years. We've been talking about the water pressure and showers and toilets since the day he came onto the national scene. That guy doesn't want to relitigate all topics. This is the king of repetition. All of a sudden, 5 minutes into the Epstein saga, he's like, why are we still talking about this? To your point, doesn't exactly comport with his past behavior.
Yeah, look, and if you just to put my cards on the table, if I had to guess, and I just want to be clear, I don't know anything more than what you know. If I had to guess, like, the way you make sense of all of this is that, the Biden administration said, look, the guy committed suicide, and that's the beginning and end of the story, because the Biden administration were filled with adults who were like worrying about war and peace around the world, and we're not interested in furthering discussion of a single criminal case in America with someone who had killed himself.
Yeah.
But that is different than the level set that the Trump administration came in, which is, are we going to release all the records? And I kind of doubt that they've released all the records.
Yeah.
I think that the Biden world was like, well, why would we release all the records? This is a closed criminal case.
Right, but to your point, the Biden administration was not filled with a bunch of podcast hosts who staked all of their credibility on releasing all of the records.
Right. And Merrick Garland never said, I have all the records sitting on my desk and I'm going to review them and release them.
Right.
But I suspect, based on, the way people are behaving, is that there is something in some records that is profoundly disquieting or embarrassing for someone in the Trump administration, or for their supporters, or for something. And, they've just decided not to release it. And maybe Dan Bongino, that's just too far from, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, look, something tells me that given the legs that this story has, this is not the last that we'll be speaking about the Epstein of it all. So if there's any updates, we'll of course cover it. For those who are watching, very important, if you're not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket's YouTube channel, that is the best way to support Mark and his team right now. Gives them a bigger megaphone so that they can reach more people. And when people come onto YouTube or any of the social media platforms looking for news, subscribing to Democracy Docket will make it so that you're not immediately filtered to right-wing content. The bigger Democracy Docket can grow, the more folks will be filtered to accurate, factual information, and that's what we need, especially in this digital media ecosystem. So again, I'll put the link to Democracy Docket's YouTube channel right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch. It is chaos inside the Trump administration. Well, it always is, but this takes the cake. This is just another day. Everybody has something about their job they don't like. Maybe it's the hours, maybe it's the money, maybe it's the effort by your boss to protect a child molester.
All right, this breaking news. Sources tell CNN that Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino has told people that he's considering resigning amid a major clash between the FBI and DOJ over the continued fallout from the release, or lack thereof, of the Jeffrey Epstein memo.
The only relatable thing about Dan Bongino is that he's had a real office job for 5 minutes and already wants to quit. Guess it's easier to spend all day talking shit about politicians in a room by yourself than actually going to work. Yes, Deputy Director of the FBI Dan Bongino has moved on from floating conspiracy theories to floating the idea that he might quit his job. And apparently it's gotten so bad, he had to take a sick day.
What we are told is Dan Bongino did not show up to work today, that he is essentially not there out of protest.
Oh, out of protest. Well, a word of caution, Dan. We all know how this administration feels about government officials protesting, so I hope your wrists are cuff ready. Now, in some ways, this is a very respectable move because Bongino is one of the only people putting his money where his mouth is. Well, maybe not his mouth, that's been wrapped around Trump's second favorite flagpole, but you get the idea.
The Jeffrey Epstein case, you do not know all the details of this thing, I promise. What names are in there, man? You understand how many powerful people probably want this thing to desperately go away?
Well, I can think of one specifically.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
Look, I'll tell you who's going to have the hardest time with all of this if Dan Bongino does actually quit. Dan Bongino. Because just over a month ago, he said the hardest thing about the job was being away from his wife.
I stare at these four walls all day in D.C., by myself, divorced from my wife. Not divorced, but I mean separated, divorced. And it's hard. I mean, we love each other, and it's hard to be apart.
Good luck at home, Dan. Sorry, babe. I know I didn't quit when the job was wrecking our marriage, but the Epstein list, that I take seriously. From the moment Trump told the world he was America's next great leader, a leader who was also too lazy to take the stairs, he made it crystal clear how he planned on running things.
We have to get the best people. We need to get the best and the finest, and if we don't, we'll be in trouble for a long period of time.
Has the long period of time started yet? Because it really feels like it has. And it's not just Dan Bongino that's one of our best and finest. There's also fellow Epstein file enthusiast Kash Patel, who is now director of the FBI. Before assuming that position, Kash was all in on the idea that only an evil, corrupt deep state would ever cover up the Epstein files.
Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are.
Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book?
FBI.
But who? That is I mean, there's.
Oh, that's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
Okay, so the buck stops with the director of the FBI. Well, whoever that guy is probably has a lot to answer for. I hope they find him one day. One of the main reasons that Kash Patel has his job, besides his choice of branded headwear, is the fact that he rose through the ranks thanks to the podcasting manosphere's obsession with finding out the truth about the Epstein files. Kash was their guy. But now that this administration, and more specifically the FBI, are refusing to release the files, well, he's become persona non grata.
Something changed because they ran on this idea of exposing it all. All these guys had great ideas. Cockeyed Kash, Dan Bongino.
He had clips, dog. He had bars.
He was ready to tear it all down. He was ready to tear down the entire FBI office.
Shut down the Hoover building day one.
Day one.
Them bitch still standing.
And then he goes on Joe Rogan and he's like, listen, do you think if I had it, I wouldn't share it with you?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I do believe that 100%, especially when you're staring at me like this, telling me that.
You know it's bad when a party that idolizes this guy starts making fun of the way you look. But hey, at least we can rest assured knowing that even if the director and deputy director of the FBI are dealing with some issues, at least our esteemed military is definitely in good hands.
You know what? We know why we were put here. We were brought here to rebuild the military, match capabilities to the threats of today. So while our adversaries have produced millions of cheap drones, before us, we were mired in bureaucratic red tape. Not anymore. In June, President Trump issued an executive order unleashing American drone dominance.
Is that what we're watching? Drone dominance? Because it looks more like a promotional video for Pete Hegseth's new boy band, Drones. But sorry, you were saying?
So today I'm rescinding restrictive policies that stifle production, and this will unleash American manufacturing and the ingenuity of our warfighters by doing three key things. First, we're going to bolster the U.S. drone manufacturing base by producing thousands of American-made products, prioritizing Buy American. We'll arm combat units with a variety of low-cost American-crafted drones, leveraging our world-leading engineers and AI experts.
Yes, nothing strikes fear in the heart of the enemy quite like the weekend Fox anchor competing against what sounds like a swarm of bees to get to his third point. But please, Pete, go on.
Senior officers, well, I'll grab this because it's the memo. Senior officers must overcome bureaucratic risk aversion in budgeting, weaponeering, and training. So here's the memo we're signing today, delivered via drone.
Wait, that whole Bruce Willis cosplay thing was to showcase that our nation's fierce fighting drones have the same capabilities as carrier pigeons? Hegseth, dude, read the room. Your boss just spent $45 million showcasing how adept our missile-loaded tanks are at navigating, well, the DC Beltway, but you can't follow that with remote-controlled machines delivering payloads of individual pieces of paper. The reality is, we all know Donald Trump loves parades, so it is no surprise that we're now watching this parade of unqualified idiots crash and burn inside the government. A place, by the way, they have spent years vilifying. And no other occupation is like that either. I doubt you're getting hired at McDonald's if on your job application, one of your stated goals is eliminating McDonald's. When you fill jobs with people who have made careers out of preaching the destruction of government, we shouldn't be surprised when they destroy government. The only reason folks like Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, and the rest even have their jobs is because before getting hired, they used to reside inside of Trump's colon.
Donald Trump is transactional, and sometimes that's used as an insult. In politics, it's the greatest compliment ever. He understands every transaction matters.
We are living in unparalleled times of corruption in both our media and government. It is our job to expose the truth, no matter what the cost. My name is Kash Patel, and I have written the first ever children's Russiagate book. It's called The Plot Against the King. It is a fantastical telling by me, the Russiagate chief investigator under then Chairman Nunes, of how we triumphed to put truth over evil and report the facts to the American public. Please go to the link below and order your copy today.
Oh, come on, man. Why beat around the bush? Kash Patel is so eager to fillet his boss, I'm surprised he didn't write, "Oh, the places I'll blow." And it should have been a pretty big wake-up call to all Americans that when these people did get hired, they couldn't believe it either.
Pam and I were just talking in the back, and we were like, do you believe this? Like, you know, we were on the campaign trail together. We were attorneys in the first administration together. Now we're here. She's the Attorney General. I'm the Director of the FBI. Like, this is insane.
Yeah, nothing says qualified like calling your own nomination, quote, insane. And frankly, it is insane. The reason we are witnessing chaos, infighting, and complete dysfunction inside of this White House is because, despite what he says, Donald Trump does not hire the best people. He hires people who say he's the best. And if that message isn't getting through, well, maybe we should send it via drone. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have watched as Greg Abbott has called a special legislative session to further gerrymander Texas's maps, and this is in advance of the next election. But you've actually broken something with your team at Democracy Docket that may cause at least a major headache, but at worst, perjury charges for somebody involved in the Texas legislature, the Republican conference in that legislature. Can you explain the situation here?
Yeah, so the Democracy Docket reporters, they compared what Greg Abbott relied on to call this special session, which was a letter sent by the Department of Justice, sent by Harmeet Dillon, Pam Bondi, the folks there, to Greg Abbott saying, your maps need to be redrawn because race was used to draw at least 4 of the districts. And you know, I had my skepticism. I know you had your skepticism that this letter was not somehow being used as a pretense by Abbott to call, to call a special session. But in any event, that's what Greg Abbott relied on. Well, it turns out that the reporters at Democracy Docket went through the trial transcripts of the ongoing redistricting litigation in that state and found several instances in which the state senator responsible for drawing the maps made very, very clear that race was not considered at all in the drawing of those maps. So essentially, you have the state of Texas defending its existing maps, which are being challenged for improperly discriminating against Black and Hispanic voters. The defense that this state senator in the state of Texas offered is, oh, no, that couldn't have been the case because you didn't use race in drawing the districts. Well, now that DOJ has sent this letter saying that these maps need to be set aside because race was used, and Greg Abbott used that as the basis to call a special session. They've got a lot of explaining to do. The state of Texas has got a lot of explaining to do. A different set of plaintiffs have filed a motion to reopen the testimony in that case, to depose or otherwise hear from this state senator who made these claims that are now seemingly at odds with what Greg Abbott is relying on in calling a special session. And the court has ordered the state of Texas to file a response to that motion by the end of today.
So you have a Republican Texas state senator who went under oath and said that the maps did not rely on race. Race wasn't a factor in drawing these maps. But now you have, so that's on one hand. And then you have the DOJ who had come forward and said that Texas's maps have to be revisited because they were drawn with race in mind. And so that was the pretense behind which Greg Abbott called this special legislative session. He says, oh, well, look, it's out of our hands. We have to. The DOJ asked us to do this because the maps were drawn with race in mind and we couldn't have that. Well, now somebody here is lying. So it's either Greg Abbott and the DOJ who are lying about race being a factor, or you've got a Republican state senator in Texas who testified under oath that race wasn't used as a factor. And if it turns out that she was lying, well, then isn't she open to perjury charges at the end of this?
Yeah, so she said several times, I drew the maps blind to race. Okay, you cannot get any clearer than that. Like there's no wiggle room there, right? I drew the maps blind of race is simply inconsistent with the idea that race was used to draw 4 districts. By the way, let me point out the 4 districts that DOJ focused on are all districts held by Democrats.
Surprise, surprise.
So surprise, surprise, right? It is 4 districts held by Democrats. And what DOJ said to the state of Texas was, This therefore makes the map illegal. And if you don't redistrict now, we are going to sue you. And so Greg Abbott said, well, we have no choice but to call a special session. It's not that we're doing this for political reasons. We're doing this because these maps were illegal because we used race and we'd otherwise be sued. So this is seemingly irreconcilable. We're going to hear from the state of Texas how they tried to, sort of figure this out. But I suspect that this was a left hand, right hand, that Greg Abbott wanted the fig leaf of DOJ saying that they had to do this so that in the middle of when Texas is in the middle of absolute horrific tragedy of human life where these floods have killed people, Greg Abbott wanted to say, I was not indifferent to that. My hands were forced. We were called out for drawing these districts based on race. And so that's why I called the special session. But like you said, you've got testimony under oath in a different case in which Democrats and progressive organizations and voting rights groups and advocates for racial minorities have been criticizing the state of Texas for years now in court for discriminating against Black and Hispanic voters by saying that race was used. And the state of Texas was saying, no race was used. It was drawn blind to race.
Right.
So I just don't know, what they're going to say, but we're going to find out at the end of today, and we will be posting on Democracy Docket when we have their answer what it is.
Great. And for folks who are looking to get that information as soon as we do have an update, if you're not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting and elections, please make sure to sign up. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, so isn't it true then that in this instance, if Greg Abbott does want to move forward with this idea that the reason he has to redraw the maps is because they were drawn with race in mind, won't that throw this Texas state senator under the bus? Because then that kind of exposes her to perjury. I mean, the only way
it throws her under the bus. It frankly throws not just her; it throws their entire case.
Yeah,
Texas has been being sued now in a series of lawsuits that have been aggressively litigated over the course of the last 3 years. Okay. And in those cases, a variety of plaintiffs have accused the state of Texas of impermissibly using race to disadvantage minority voters. Okay. That is the background of why this state senator issued such a blanket statement repeatedly, because she was defending this map against the legal challenges brought by these communities that had been disadvantaged by it. And
so the same map that they're trying to say should stand because race wasn't a factor. Now those same people, realizing that they can gerrymander further, are saying, in fact, race was too much of a factor, and so this map has to be undone. But the fact that it was blind to race was the whole reason, was what their whole case was propped up on to begin with.
Right, and why this map was used in 2022. Why this map was used in 2024, why they wanted until a few days ago to use it again in 2026. Like, this is a scandal that goes beyond one state senator testifying and the potential consequences of that. This goes to who else in the Texas government who filed these briefs, who else in the Texas AG's office who filed these briefs, who was signing off saying over and over again, telling federal judges that there was no use of race, that this was drawn race blind. Who was responsible for saying that, when now apparently the state of Texas is prepared to say, no, in fact, not one, not two, not three, but at least 4 districts were drawn using race. Something's not right here. And I strongly suspect that this state senator, her answer is not going to be, well, it was just me alone.
Yeah. So to that point then, I mean, a lot of people have legal exposure. Is this the kind of thing where, if somebody said one thing to the courts and then has a completely different position, does that give them legal? Is that something that we've seen precedent hold in the past, where folks who've said one thing to the court and then completely changed their position, suddenly they do have legal exposure themselves?
Yeah, look, this could affect the legal exposure of individuals. This could affect the ethics of people involved. I'm not jumping to the conclusion that it does. I'm just saying, like, that is in the ambit, and it ultimately could expose folks to sanctions from the court, right? I mean, the judge is not going to be thrilled that they went through an entire trial and received false testimony.
Right.
only to find out that the trial may need to be redone or reopened. Or
is this
or
grounds?
the evidence.
Is this grounds to reopen these trials?
Absolutely. That is what this motion is that we're waiting on a response for. What the plaintiffs have said, who filed this motion on an emergency basis, is that new evidence reveals that witnesses potentially falsely testified that the Texas congressional map was drawn without consideration of race, and that this is flatly contradictory to what Abbott approvingly cited about the DOJ letter. And then they go on to say in their motion, one or the other is false. And plaintiffs in the court are entitled to probe whether key witnesses truthfully testified at deposition and trial on the central question of this case, given the new evidence. I mean, this is a potential game changer in the cases that have been going on. This is a potential game changer in Greg Abbott's theory about why there needs to be a special session. This potentially will have huge ramifications across the board for what the map looks like in Texas, and not in the way in which the White House and Pam Bondi and the Republicans in Congress who have hoisted this on the state of Texas intended.
So we've spoken about the legal exposure that these individuals might have, the extent to which they might be sanctioned. That all notwithstanding, what about the maps themselves? I understand that this might be a situation where they can't move forward with their effort to change the maps, but are the maps that are in place even valid right now if this process plays itself out and we find out that in fact some folks did lie?
No, potentially not. That's the point, right? I mean, the whole thing here is that the plaintiffs who have been litigating this case, their whole point is that the maps that were passed by the Texas legislature in 2021 were illegal and unconstitutional because they discriminated against minority voters. Okay, that is the lawsuit that has been going on here. And like I said, the judges are not going to be amused that they went through years of discovery and months and then had a trial and hearings upon hearings and a trial, only to find out that that the central issue, according to these plaintiffs,
was a lie.
There may have been false testimony.
Yeah.
Now, again, it maybe there wasn't false testimony, and then what it is Abbott's reliance on this letter gets called into question, and I would say there is then a national scandal, and I would argue a potential constitutional crisis if it turns out that the Department of Justice somehow purposely sent a false letter to the governor of Texas in order to instigate a political process to benefit the party of Donald Trump. Now, that may not sound like anything new, but I'm telling you, that is a new low if that's what it came to be for the Department of Justice. And I suspect one way or another, these judges are going to want to get to the bottom of it. Was this letter on the up and up to begin with? Or was this state senator correct in what she was saying? It was drawn not based on race, but that somehow this letter then gets generated. How did this letter get generated? What is the basis of the claim that race was used? And was Greg Abbott in on that? Was he confused by it? Was he distracted? Was this all just a series of misunderstandings? I don't know, but it certainly doesn't look good. And that's why I think the court has asked for such a quick turnaround. Judges are not usually in the business of reopening testimony. That is an extraordinary ask. And the fact that the judge here has asked for a briefing on or a response on such an expedited basis suggests this judge wants to know what the hell is going on.
And finally, let's finish off with this. Gavin Newsom was asked about this situation and suggested that California might be in a position to respond if in fact, lawsuit notwithstanding, if in fact Texas does go through by yet again perverting this process and further gerrymandering their maps, that there are opportunities for California to be able to do the same. California currently has an independent redistricting commission, but that it is kind of a weapon on standby in the event that it needs to be deployed. Can I have your reaction to that?
Yeah, good for Gavin Newsom. I mean, look, I've said this before, and I'm sure you get the negative comments when I say it, but I'm going to say it again. We cannot have a system in which Democrats play by one set of rules and Republicans by another. And that is what we have right now in redistricting. Everyone needs to understand that. California has an independent redistricting commission. New Jersey has an independent process, which is a little bit different. New York has rules against partisan gerrymandering and an independent commission that in the first instance draws map. Virginia, a state that Democrats may very well control and have controlled before, moved to special masters to avoid claims of partisan gerrymandering. I could go state after state, Colorado, I could go on and on about Democratic states that have essentially not taken advantage of their ability to draw partisan gerrymanders, but rather have put their faith in less partisan or nonpartisan or bipartisan processes. And I am here to tell you, we are not going to survive this era if every Republican state moves to the most extreme, grotesque form of gerrymandering. Because to be clear, the map in Texas is already an impermissible gerrymander. What they are talking about doing is taking a gross gerrymander and making it a grotesque gerrymander. And if that is allowed to take place in Republican state after Republican state after Republican state, and Democrats continue to play by a different set of rules, we're simply not going to have a democracy. We're going to have an autocracy. And so kudos to Gavin Newsom for saying he, for one, is not going to stand by it. And California is obviously the largest number of seats where Democrats could really make a difference.
Yeah, look, I don't think you're going to get much pushback from my audience. I have been saying for as long as I can remember that unilaterally disarming is not the way that Democrats are going to achieve any power. And the fact that we do it so frequently has been why Republicans have felt so emboldened to carry out these schemes like they are right now. So I do hope that we see it not just from California. I don't want to just see tit for tat. I want to see the governor of California, the governor of New Jersey, the governor of New York, anywhere where we have the ability to deploy some weapons, electorally speaking, for them to come out and say, you want to do this? Get ready for, us to respond in a way that will far exceed what you're going to do in Texas. You want to try to steal 4 seats from Democrats in Texas? Great. Let's try to flip 10 between the states that we have. And this way it will actually show some fight on the left to prevent, to serve as a deterrent for these Republicans that think at this point that they can just do anything without any pushback, that Democrats are never going to respond to anything that they do, because it's clearly the idea that they have right now. So look, we will, of course, continue watching this. I know that you're going to cover this as soon as you have any update on the judicial front. So again, recommend to anybody who's watching right now, if you want to get that update as soon as it breaks, please sign up for Democracy Docket, the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting and elections. I'm going to put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.
We all have busy lives, and President Trump has a busy life, and I don't think he realizes how much she's humiliated the administration. This is a self-inflicted wound. She caused it. Again, I have nothing against Pam Bondi, but if you want to look for the villain in this story, we have found her. She is the person she's either lying now or she was lying then. There's no two ways about it.
So, but Megyn, you make a very astute point, and let me add to it, which is that she also brought in some of our best influencers, people that I care about deeply. Jack Posobiec, who's incredible, Libs of TikTok, Chaya, DC Drano.
Yeah.
And she gave them these binders, and she humiliated them.
Yeah.
And you guys know what I'm talking about? Where she did this stuff with the binders?
This?
And
yes.
You guys were upset, but you shouldn't be upset, the influencers. They were handed these binders like there was something incredible in them.
It is what you would do to an enemy. It would have been a brilliant operation had she loathed them and been looking to undermine them. The trick would have been perfect had this been Joe Biden's White House doing this to some of President Trump's most loyal supporters and media advocates. What happened was they invited all of them there to say hi to the vice president, to say hi to the president. Sure, they all went, of course. Who wouldn't go? To the White House to say hello to Trump? They didn't expect anything on Epstein. So they went, they said hello, and before they knew it, they were pulled into a room with Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, and she had made the binders. She bragged about making the cover sheet that read Epstein Files, Phase 1, and she handed them out. And what Liz Wheeler, who was there, told me was that she told them, there's not that much in here, but another trove is coming. I'm going to get it from the FBI, but here's Phase 1. Flash forward 14 hours earlier to when she was on with Jesse Waters on Fox News saying, oh, you're going to see some Epstein documents tomorrow. She knew they were bullshit. She knew that there was nothing in there. She told the influencers when she gave it to them, there's really nothing in here. I'm going to try to get you more. And in the meantime, then they funneled them out the back of the White House where all the press corps was. And the influencers are standing there with these binders. They didn't even know they were there for Epstein, and they looked foolish through no fault of their own. The only fault was they trusted her.
And these are some of our best people that that we should have their back. Liz Wheeler's amazing, Jack Posobiec.
Yes.
And they got...
She dinged their credibility for no reason.
100%. And did they ever get an apology for that?
No.
That was Charlie Kirk and Megyn Kelly carrying water for Trump as the White House continues to be plagued by the fallout surrounding the Epstein debacle. And I say carrying water for Trump on purpose, because clearly the talking points have gone out, wherein the MAGA universe has decided that the villain of this story is not Donald Trump, but rather Attorney General Pam Bondi. Now, I want to make one thing abundantly clear. Pam Bondi is not the ultimate authority here, and anybody who truly wants to get to the truth about Epstein would not delude themselves into thinking the villain is Bondi. She is a mere appendage of Trump. She takes her orders from him. She has zero autonomy. If information is being withheld here, it is on his orders. So if you're pretending that Bondi is the ultimate authority here, then you care more about protecting Trump than you do about exposing the truth about Epstein. In fact, here's a point that I made on air on Piers Morgan's show. We've seen Dan Bongino and Kash Patel focus so much energy, so many resources, so much time on this exact issue, only for them to come out and say, oh, well, there's absolutely nothing here. But I would also caution, Natalie, to not put the onus, because I've been seeing this more and more on the right, to not put all of the responsibility on Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi is an appendage of Donald Trump. She is not calling the shots. Nobody in this administration is calling the shots. This entire cabinet, this entire White House exists to serve Donald Trump. They exist to basically be extensions of Trump himself, and no one will ever act independently of him. And so if accountability is really what you're looking for here, and I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that this is all being done in good faith, then let's not delude ourselves into thinking that Pam Bondi is the final word or that the buck stops with her, when the buck always stops with Donald Trump. So keep an eye out for who people focus their ire on. If people are pretending that Bondi is the villain here, then they are more focused on protecting Trump than they are about getting to the truth about Epstein. Kirk goes on to explain how Bondi humiliated these influencers as if they have no agency here, as if they didn't wave around their binders on their own free will. And you know where I got that video, by the way? On Charlie Kirk's own tweet, where he wrote, "The Epstein Files Phase 1, it's happening." That right there is why there is so much deflection going on, because those people need someone to blame to take the responsibility off of themselves. But remember, none of these people are children. They are grown-ass adults. You don't get to cry victim just because you got caught lying. Pam Bondi did not force you all to flash your binders for the cameras. She didn't force you all to smile. She certainly didn't force you all to post on Twitter, and yet that didn't stop people like Charlie Kirk and Jack Posobiec and libs of TikTok's Chaya Raichik from posting anyway. Of course, now that they got caught laundering Trump's lies, they suddenly crawl into the fetal position and pretend that they're the victims here, but they're not, no matter how much they bitch and moan. Like, let's think about this logically for a moment. What does Pam Bondi have to gain by covering up the Epstein list? Now think about what her immediate boss, Donald Trump, might have to gain by covering up the Epstein list. Compare those two people, think long and hard, and now tell me which one is truly responsible for failing to release the client list. And while you're pondering that question, I'll leave you with this. Here's some footage that may or may not help move your thought process along. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. We've got a full-blown weekend meltdown by Donald Trump as the Epstein scandal continues to wreak havoc on his administration. He took to Truth Social and wrote, "What's going on with my boys and in some cases gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it, all over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who con the world with the Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more? They created the Epstein files just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me, and now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? They haven't given up on the John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King Jr. files, no matter how much success we have had, securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons. It's never enough for some people. We are about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years, and we have so much more to do. We are saving our country and making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. The left is imploding. Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen, and they tried to do the same thing in 2024. That's what she was looking into as AG, and much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter." Now, this message tells us a lot. First of all, Trump is clearly in a full-blown panic about the Epstein files. Do you really think that if there was nothing at all incriminating within those files, that he would voluntarily choose to prolong what has become the biggest scandal of his presidency? I mean, honestly, just look at the disastrous coverage from his closest allies that this drama has ushered in.
Do you believe that DOJ and FBI right now, with the guys who are all close to Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, do you think they have any credibility left to pursue this?
No, and I'll tell you exactly why, Steve, because in 2016, we trusted the plan with Trump. But now Trump has become the deep state. The exact thing we voted him in.
Why do you say he's become the deep state?
What is more deep state than covering up for pedophiles? Why would you go to that island? Why? Tell me, why would you go to that island?
And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February.
So we're stupid.
Yeah.
We're the fucking idiots, guys. Just to let you know, we're wasting time.
At us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point.
That is, like, in all seriousness, that is, I think, what is enraging people right now is it's insulting our intelligence. Like, obviously, the intelligence community is trying to cover it up. Obviously, the Trump administration is trying to cover up. Something changed because they ran on this idea of exposing it all. All these guys had great ideas. Cockeyed Kash, Dan Bongino.
He had clips, dog. He had bars.
He was ready to tear it all down. He was ready to tear down the entire FBI office.
Shut down the Hoover building day one.
Day one.
That bitch still standing.
And then he goes on Joe Rogan and he's like, listen, do you think if I had it, I wouldn't share it with you?
I do.
Yeah.
Timing of it,
Come on.
just seems.
Come on.
It seems like I'll take how do we get the attention off of Epstein for 500, please, Alex.
I hope this story breaking today isn't just a cover story or diversion from the giant fiasco with the FBI and DOJ doing a 180 on Epstein.
So that's it? No client list? Epstein killed himself? No further investigations? Case closed?
Hey, we're going to do an investigation. Now, we can't tell you about the investigation because it's under investigation, so we can't actually talk about the investigation of the people that are being investigated, but they're under investigation.
We don't rise and fall with Trump. We need him. It's a historic thing that's happening. But that said, I'm not breaking my integrity or my morals or what I stand for nobody.
Now, think about this logically. If all Trump had to do was stem the bleeding and make all of this go away was to simply release the files, don't you think he would do it? Which raises the obvious question, why isn't Donald Trump just releasing these files? What could Trump possibly have to hide when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein? I mean, I really do want to be fair here and not jump to any rash conclusions, but something tells me that when it comes to Trump and Epstein, I don't know, there's just this feeling I get that there's more to their relationship than meets the eye. But hey, maybe I'm just being paranoid and there's actually no there there. Am I right? And of course, when Trump feels backed into a corner, what does he do? He lashes out at who else but Joe Biden. I spoke with Mark Elias about why the Biden administration might not have felt the need to release anything. Here's what he had to say.
If I had to guess, like the way you make sense of all of this is that, the Biden administration said, look, the guy committed suicide, and that's the beginning and end of the story, because the Biden administration were filled with adults who were like worrying about war and peace around the world, and we're not interested in furthering discussion of a single criminal case in America with someone who had killed himself.
Yeah.
But that is different than the level set that the Trump administration came in, which is, are we going to release all the records? And I kind of doubt that they've released all the records.
Yeah.
I think that the Biden world was like, well, why would we release all the records? This is a closed criminal case.
Right, but to your point, the Biden administration was not filled with a bunch of podcast hosts who staked all of their credibility on releasing all of the records.
Right, and Merrick Garland never said, I have all the records sitting on my desk and I'm going to review them and release them.
Right.
But I suspect, based on the way people are behaving, is that there is something in some records that is profoundly disquieting or embarrassing for someone in the Trump administration or for their supporters or for something. And, they've just decided not to release it. And maybe Dan Bongino, that's just too far from, but I don't know.
And at the end of the day, that's the thing. Biden and his officials in their White House did not stake their brands or their credibility on this thing. It just wasn't a priority. Epstein died in 2019 when Trump was first in office. This was never really a Biden thing. But Trump's White House is composed of a lot of people who focused on this relentlessly. If they had any mandate coming into Trump's second term, it was to release these files. We heard it from Kash Patel. We heard it from Dan Bongino, Alina Habba, Pam Bondi, even Donald Trump himself. They brought it up. They staked their reputations on this, meaning you don't get to diffuse responsibility onto Biden because this has nothing to do with Biden and everything to do with you, Donald Trump. You're the president, not Biden. And if you're making the decision to withhold information now, which it sure seems like is the case, that's not on the previous president, it's on the current one. The reality is that Donald Trump is very clearly trying his level best to talk about anything other than Jeffrey Epstein. He literally posted this morning, quote, "Because of the fact that Rosie O'Donnell is not in the best interests of our country, I am giving serious consideration to taking away her citizenship. She is a threat to humanity and should remain in the wonderful country of Ireland if they want her. God bless America." He's not going to denaturalize Rosie O'Donnell, but this is a perfect example of the lengths that he will go to in his effort to distract everyone. Unfortunately for him, it didn't work. And so instead, he just came out and posted, quote, "Let's not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about," when very clearly they do. I don't know how much more obvious you can make it that there is something that scares Donald Trump about these files. And if he thought that that was going to make all these people look away, he's about to learn a quick lesson in reality. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. This is Democracy Watch. Mark, by now, I think most people have seen the unhinged screed that Donald Trump posted about Jeffrey Epstein. I'm going to read a quick sentence from it, and then I want to get into a more insidious rationale that he might have for posting this. He wrote, "For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with the Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more? They created the Epstein files just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me, and now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands." And so there are some obvious reasons, I think, that we can all imagine as to why Donald Trump might not want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, the guy who called Donald Trump his closest friend for 10 years. But you and I have spoken about a more insidious rationale that Trump might have for bringing this up specifically. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so look, we don't know, but my first reaction upon reading this is how odd he has now confirmed the existence of the Epstein files, right? Like the Trump administration's position up until the posting of this social media post was nothing to see. There are no files. There are no client lists. The videotape we've released, we've done full transparency, and there's just no there. Here, what he seems to be saying is actually there are something called the Epstein files, but that they're forgeries that were written by, as you just read, former President Obama, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, Brennan, and assorted losers and criminals of the Biden administration. I will leave that to you to sort out who those are, but it's quite a group that got together, I guess, with pen and pad and wrote this out. But in all seriousness, he seems to be preparing for there to be some release or some insinuation or some, belief that there are actual files. And so rather than saying they don't exist, he seems to now have pivoted to, all right, when you see them or when you hear about them, they are forgeries.
So it's possible that he could just be setting the stage, knowing full well that that he's not going to be able to get out from under this thing, that we have the prospect of Dan Bongino quitting over this thing. We have the prospect of Pam Bondi leaving the DOJ over this thing. And so it might very well be an inevitability that it's going to get out. And so in anticipation of that, knowing that he may very well be exposed on this thing, or some close donors or advisors or friends, whoever it may be exposed on this thing, he's just setting the stage to be able to say that this is all fake. Does that basically cover it?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, Brian. I started, with being quite skeptical that there was any there. I myself have been the victim of right-wing conspiracy theories. I've had clients who have been the victim of Donald Trump's, fevered right-wing conspiracy theories. So I try to really not traffic in them. Then, earlier this week, there was kind of like a leopard ate my face kind of component to this. It was like, here it is. He trafficked in conspiracy theories, and now it's coming back to bite them as his supporters don't believe him. That believe his administration. But this puts a really different cast on it. And I have to say, it has moved my own thinking about this, because it does seem that he is preparing that there will be an assertion of there being files. Now, I don't know what those files are. I don't know what he thinks is in them, or whether he actually does think they are, but he's just afraid, does think they exist, or just afraid of it. But, you mentioned some of the things that he could be concerned about involving senior people at the Department of Justice. But remember, they have also purged a lot of people from the FBI. They have purged a lot of people from the Department of Justice. Like, this is not exactly an administration that is airtight when it comes to people comings and goings in the Department of Justice. So again, I don't know what he is thinking, and God help us trying to put ourselves in his brain. But this does seem to me, as I read it as a lawyer, more of a confirmation of there being files than a denial of there being files. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why would he do that, particularly where he is, laying it at the feet of, I mean, the idea that somehow, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and James Comey wrote files about a sex trafficker in New York is just implausible.
Right.
I mean, beyond implausible. It's ridiculous. But he is laying that out because he wants to, it sounds to me like, replace one conspiracy theory with another.
Well, we have seen the extent to which he will go to the mat to perpetuate the existence of a bogus conspiracy theory. Look what he's done with the rigged 2020 election claims. I mean, he went so far as to claim that we need prosecutions of people that did not do anything because he is so focused on manifesting into reality his fever dreams. And so what could that look like in this situation? I mean, he's already laid out some names right here in these tweets. And so do you think there's a world in which he does the same thing that he did with the 2020 election, that he goes to the mat, that he tries to carry out these political persecutions of people so that he can convince himself, but more importantly, his supporters, that in fact he had nothing to do with it? This was all some big conspiracy that Brennan and Comey and Obama and Biden were involved in?
Look, we end up with the John Durham investigation, which was a witch hunt to try to go after the FBI and others associated with the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton, go after the people who were the victims of the Russian interference in the 2016 election, and also the FBI that investigated it. And part of the impetus for that people forget was Donald Trump waking up one day, and I think it was posting on social media, but correct me if I'm misremembering this, that Barack Obama had wiretapped him.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, what happens is he thinks he has a vulnerability on this thing, right? 2016 election. He then asserts this crazy theory that, Barack Obama or the White House was somehow spying on him in Trump Towers. And the next thing you know, there is actually now a criminal investigation looking into that. It is important to note that as you read down, you read a short portion of a really unhinged social media post, but as you read down that social media post, he doubles back to saying that essentially, instead of spending time on the Epstein investigation, he directs the FBI. And by the way, like, when the president of the United States directs the FBI to do something, that's quite chilling.
Right.
And he directs them to, quote, be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, and the rigged and stolen election of 2020. And then he goes on to say that essentially Democrats tried to do it again in 2024, and Pam Bondi's looking into that. So whether he is going to, whether the reaction here is going to be to investigate a forged file, I suspect will depend on whether or not he thinks that is necessary. But at a minimum, he is diverting attention here to say, look, I'm going to investigate my political opponents who happen to overlap with, in large measure with the people he's now saying forged these files. And I don't think it's any coincidence. This also comes on the same day that he announced that he's going to try to strip the citizenship of a native-born American, Rosie O'Donnell, something that he has absolutely no power to do. Congress doesn't have the power to do. But I don't think that was an effort, now that I've seen this, to divert attention. I think it's actually his idea here is that he's going to weaponize the Department of Justice in as many extreme fashions as possible, so that he has that sort of machine, that war machine against his enemies going, so that if these files come out, people be warned, that he will then turn it on them.
I think you're exactly right about the fact that he is laying the groundwork now to do this. And we have seen these instances where he starts to introduce kind of an ember of an idea and how quickly that explodes into a full-blown inferno. We saw it with the Obama wiretapping. We've seen it with everything as it relates to the 2020 election. And so this is, it's smart to see it right away, because we usually don't see it until it's ballooned into something bigger. But this is it. This is the very first instance where he is going to focus, he's going to fixate on Comey and Brennan, Obama and Biden, and pretend and convince his supporters, more importantly, that they were involved in some whole, forgery scheme, so that he doesn't have to take responsibility for whatever, may very well be on those documents itself. And so, I do think it's important that we recognize what he's trying to do as he's trying to do it, so that when it happens, when he goes on and repeats it over and over and over again, it's not, people will recognize the whole point of it, and that is really just to serve as some distraction from the reality of what those files might hold.
Yeah, and look, again, to be clear, like, you and I don't know, this is we're piecing this all together. But that said, I can't help but pick up on something you just said, which is normally he does embers, and the embers burn, and like, we're not really paying all that much attention to those embers burning until they're burning really hot. And what's interesting in the last week is how clumsy he has been, right? Like, it has not been subtly placing embers. First, you had the situation on Tuesday, which I know you covered extensively on your channel, where he kind of like jumps into, in the middle of a cabinet meeting, jumps into an answer that of a question that was asked to Pam Bondi about Epstein. And that struck a lot of people at the time as quite clumsy for him. This is someone who's usually pretty stagecraft about this stuff. And then this social media post today also feels very, very panicked. It feels very, no,
it's the truth. You and I had spoken off camera when we first logged on here about how this is actually very out of character for someone who has a pretty tight grip on what the narrative usually is. And this is so overtly panicked, so obviously panicked, that it is way out of character for somebody who's able to, he's got the right-wing media ecosystem wrapped around his finger, but this does not seem like a very characteristic post that he would make, especially if he's trying to divert your attention away from something else. He literally comes out and says, "Why are we talking about this? It's always Epstein, Epstein, Epstein." This is somebody who's really lost the plot, and it does seem completely unhinged.
Yeah, and it seems unhinged in a different way than he is usually unhinged. He is usually unhinged in leading a parade.
Yeah.
And here it feels like he's unhinged trying to stop a parade.
Correct.
And it's like the parade is like walking down the street, and there are marching bands and people crowded on the sidewalk, and he's like, there's no parade here. Nobody see a parade. And that is why I say it just feels very out of character, because normally, even when he was at odds with some in his coalition around the Iran bombing, it felt very much like he was leading. It felt very much like he was the man setting the tempo. And this feels like someone who has totally lost the tune. He is not just not setting the tempo. Like, he's playing off one song sheet, and they're screaming on another one.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens next. I share your opinion here that, I came into this very skeptical. I mostly was focusing on the irony of the fact that, this is an administration composed of people who really predicated so much of their identity, so much of their brand on releasing these files, and how they got conned by, Alina Habba and Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and even Trump himself, because really they were lied to. But now, given the fact that they have protested, that Trump is protesting so loudly, I've switched over from just being, interested in the fact that this is a very overt lie, that it's very clearly splintering the MAGA base. But now that where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And if you have Donald Trump protesting so loudly against this stuff, whereas I was pretty skeptical before about the existence of anything, now legitimately speaking, I have to only imagine that there must be something worth hiding if Donald Trump is so upset about the prospect of something getting out.
Right. And to me, the biggest tell of how panicked he is that he has actually now set up his attorney general and FBI director. Because remember, where we were just a few days ago is they said there are no files. There is no list, right? We went from Pam Bondi saying there are files and a list and they're on my desk, to them having to walk that all the way back and her saying, look, there were files, but there's nothing in them, blah, 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 blah. And now the question is that some reporter has to ask Pam Bondi is, what are the forged files? Like, can you release the documents that Barack Obama wrote? Can you release the files created by James Comey and Brennan, right? Yeah. And so he has in some ways undercut the strategy as it had been up until now of basically saying there is no there. There's nothing, there is nothing there. And now they are stuck in this place. So, I mean, your job is usually to ask me questions, but I'll ask you one. Like, what does Pam Bondi do now?
I mean, at this point, I truly don't know, because she went from saying the Epstein client list is on my desk, I'm going to go check it out in a few minutes, to saying, just kidding, it doesn't exist, to now, just kidding again, it exists, but it's clearly a forgery that was made in some back room where James Comey, John Brennan, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden were all scribbling down some fake names to get us off the trail. So I have no clue what Pam Bondi does from here, but my only hope is that even those folks who are acting in good faith on the right, who are rightly concerned about what we're seeing, that they don't allow themselves to be conned by the very obvious deflections that Donald Trump is making here. Already we had, Charlie Kirk come out and offer some very uncritical amplification of Trump's own tweet, and there are going to be these sycophants who are going to be willing to do that. But I hope that there's enough people on the right. I hope that even the Laura Loomers who seem to really care about this, the Andrew Schultzes who seem to care about this, the Dave Smiths who seem to care about this, that they don't allow Donald Trump to throw them off the scent with these very bargain basement tactics that we're about to see. But with that said, it's moving pretty quickly, and it seems to be a fire that's gotten a little bit out of control as far as Trump is concerned. So we will continue to cover this. One quick note for everybody who's watching right now, please make sure to support independent progressive media. And if you are not yet subscribed to Mark's YouTube channel, Democracy Docket, please make sure to subscribe. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe to the channel, but it helps build up his voice and his teams, and they are the ones fighting on the front lines of this stuff, especially in the court. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch. I'm joined now by Congressman Jamie Raskin. Thanks so much for joining me.
Great to be with you, Brian.
So, Congressman, the Epstein scandal has kind of poured into the spotlight in a way that we haven't seen happen before. What are you able to do in your role on judiciary to try and compel some of the information that clearly it seems like Donald Trump has a vested interest in hiding?
Well, look, every Republican that I've spoken to, whether it's somebody in Congress or just out in the street, who wants this information to be released. And Donald Trump promised it. J.D. Vance promised it. The whole Republican establishment was behind it, including Attorney General Bondi, including Dan Bongino, including Kash Patel. And so they want it released. And what I'm trying to explain to them is they don't need to convince Donald Trump. They just need to convince the Republicans in Congress. Jim Jordan and the Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee have the subpoena power. So we can have a hearing and just subpoena the Attorney General, subpoena Kash Patel to come in, tell us everything they know, and turn over the client list and turn over the information that not only Republicans, but Democrats have been demanding since the Biden administration. I called for this several years ago. the Epstein is a convicted sex offender who is running a child sex ring. He's gone, so his prosecution's over, so there can be no prejudice there. And then meantime, you've got the president of the United States and all these other officials saying that there's a client list and that there's evidence of this sex ring taking place. And rather than have the whole country divided and in uproar about it, let's just come clean, and they should show us what they've got. Pam Bondi said it was on her desk. Take it off of her desk and bring it over to Congress. So I'm sending a letter on Monday to Chairman Jordan saying, let's just have a hearing and let us disclose whatever the government has to the people of the United States.
So is Jim Jordan the only impediment then to being able to subpoena whatever information exists?
Well, I don't know that he is an impediment. I mean, we haven't spoken about it yet. I think everybody assumed the administration was going to release this information because they said they would. And of course,
what with it being the thing that they had predicated their entire brand on.
Well, and Pam Bondi had that first horrible big press conference release situation where it was just a bunch of recycled flotsam and jetsam. But people want to know what is really in there. And look, we don't want doctored evidence. We don't want fabricated evidence. If all of it was made up, then the public's got a right to know. If it wasn't made up, if it's real, we've got a right to know what names are on there. And now with Donald Trump going out on a limb and saying, oh, just, leave me alone. Let's just, pretend the whole thing didn't happen. People are asking the question, why?
Well, it looks like you're taking a multi-pronged approach here because this letter will go out to Jim Jordan on Monday. You've also reached out to Pam Bondi herself. Can you explain what you said in your correspondence with her?
Well, we want the Jack Smith second report released on Donald Trump's illegal retention of classified documents, hundreds of them at Mar-a-Lago. We want that report released the way the first report was released, the way Bondi's predecessor, Attorney General Merrick Garland, released the report on Hunter Biden, released the special counsel report by special counsel Robert Hur about Joe Biden's retention of a handful of classified documents. All that should be public, okay? Release that and release the Epstein file. At the very least, you got to release what's in there that references Donald Trump.
Right.
But go ahead and just release the whole thing. So that's what we said. We have not heard back from Pam Bondi. And unfortunately, that's a pattern with this administration. I mean, unlike prior administrations, except for Trump, they basically don't answer questions and letters that have been sent in by the minority party.
Congressman, what do you make of the whiplash back and forth between Trump and his team initially coming out and saying that this client list is going to be released imminently? Pam Bondi suggested that it was on her desk waiting for her to just review it and then she would be able to send it out. Then suddenly on Monday of this past week, Trump said not only is there no client list, doesn't exist, but the case is closed. And now you have this newest post by Trump where he logged onto Truth Social and said that, okay, it does exist, but it's a fake Epstein list that was written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals in the Biden administration.
Yeah, so the stories are constantly changing. First, the client list was on Pam Bondi's desk. Several people said that they saw it and they wanted it released. Then it didn't exist. And now, it exists, but it's a fabrication of the Biden administration, which is odd since they never released anything. And there were still criminal prosecutions and potential criminal prosecutions taking place because it wasn't just Epstein, but it was his partner in crime, Maxwell, and then they had a French Confederate as well. I think his name was Jean-Luc Godard. And in any event, it was never released. So they should just release the law enforcement files that exist from all of the prosecutions and all of the prosecutors and police, whether in Florida or New York or Europe or anywhere else.
What do you make of this new kind of talking point that's kind of emerged on the right where a lot of folks are really upset at Pam Bondi? Do you think that in an administration where, I mean, we've seen these cabinet meetings where they go around the table and take turns genuflecting at the altar of Trump. Do you really believe that the buck here stops with Pam Bondi, or do you think that anything that's going to happen is going to happen at the behest and command of Donald Trump himself?
Well, of course, that's what Pam Bondi has said. I mean, they've taken the Justice Department, which traditionally has been a huge force of lawyers that represent the rule of law, the Department of Justice, the government of the United States, and the interests of the American people and the Constitution, and they turned it into the personal law firm of Donald Trump. They don't pretend it's anything else. So obviously, they're acting in Donald Trump's own interests. They don't pretend to be doing anything else. So it means either Donald Trump is himself implicated, and we know that he knew Epstein well. We know that Elon Musk has said that he's in the
files themselves,
in the files, and we know that there's lots of photographs of them together, and we know that Donald Trump himself has spoken openly about his friendship of Epstein and how Epstein admired women as much as he did, but he liked younger ones. I mean, so he clearly knew what was going on. They have, for some reason, been able to make political hay out of this whole thing for so long, for whatever reason. Enough. Let's put it to rest. Release everything. Let's come clean. Like we don't need to generate more paranoia in the country. We need to just set the record clear. And Epstein is gone, and there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to release this list. So either Donald Trump is protecting himself because he's on it, and or he's protecting other people who are on it, and or there are people that he wants to have leverage over. You know, Donald Trump, as we've seen over the last half year, is all about leverage over the law firms. I'm going to hold executive orders against you. I'm going to prevent you from going into federal government buildings or getting federal security clearance unless you do X, Y, or Z. I'm going to lord it over Harvard University and Columbia University and all other colleges unless you do X, Y, or Z. And so, you know, if he's not on there, or maybe he is, but in any event, if there's other people on there and he thinks he can use this against them, that's another possibility. But in any event, there is a very compelling public interest now in just coming clean and releasing these documents to the public.
You know, Megyn Kelly is one of probably the biggest voices that's decided that Pam Bondi should be the scapegoat for all of this. Do you think that in a scenario where Pam Bondi either resigned or was fired, that some subsequent attorney general would suddenly be the one to release the files that Pam Bondi wouldn't under Trump?
Well, again, it all goes back to Trump and what Trump wants to do. Right. I'm sure Bondi will follow him. Right. For some reason, they've done a complete 180-degree U-turn on this, and now they don't want anything to come out. And look, you know, this is a situation where there are entire forces on the right with QAnon that have built, you know, not just intense interest in this case, but kind of a whole political theory around satanic child sex abuse rings. And you know, when all that first started, you remember they went to Comet Pizza, they were blaming everything on Democrats, and Democrats just look at them like they're from outer space, like this is just deranged stuff. But we've got a case with Epstein where this is real, where there is a real child sexual abuser, and he had parties and he had a whole social network around it, and they should release what's there so we can dispel the paranoid part of it and get to the facts of what actually happened.
You know, one element of the long winding screed that Trump posted, and this was the part that I read before, was his blame of Obama, Clinton, Comey, Brennan. And we've seen instances in the past where Trump will make up a lie, but then go to the ends of the earth to substantiate that lie. He said, for example, that he won the 2020 election. He went so far as to incite an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol to try and substantiate that. He wanted to take voting machines out of Georgia. I mean, the crimes were just endless in his effort to manifest into reality, to try and prove his lies. All of these things to basically just prop up his ego. This is kind of a similar situation where he has a major issue that he's contending with that could determine whether or not, people are gonna continue to support him moving forward or not. And he's already laid the groundwork with a bunch of people who he's decided are going to be the scapegoats here. And so do you have any concern as it relates to Comey or Brennan or Clinton or Obama that he might go to the mat with this lie in very much the same way that he did with the rigged 2020 election lie?
Well, certainly he will. And he will try to get, his followers to believe in another concoction. I mean, at a certain point, he just piles lie on lie on lie, and then you have to accept an alternate universe. Voltaire said, anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And we saw that on January 6th, 2021. Joe Biden beat him by more than 7 million votes. And just to give you some contextual contrast there, Trump beat Kamala by 2 million votes, and they call that a landslide. But in any event, Biden in 2020 beat Trump by a landslide 3 times as big, and they denied it, and he incited a violent insurrection. He tried to organize a political coup to overthrow the election. All of his alleged evidence was rejected by more than 60 federal courts, including by 7 judges he had himself named to the bench. And they've never been able to prove anything. His own Homeland Security person in charge of cybersecurity and election security said it was the most secure election in American history, and yet he continued to propound that lie, to incite an insurrection against the Constitution of the Union, and then continues to promote that falsehood to this day. In fact, it's in the Truth Social missive that you just cited. It was in the one he sent out saying that he's going to get the Attorney General to work on that. So, I hope that people will see Donald Trump's absolutely convenient relationship to the truth. If he happens to bump into the truth and it's to his benefit, he'll embrace it. But otherwise, he's going to lie all the way to the heavens about it, and and drag everybody else into hell around it. And that's what happened on January 6th.
And let's finish off with this. This does feel like the first moment. I mean, there have been a lot of lies, and we've seen that Trump's base is exceptionally willing or uniquely willing to believe a lot of the bullshit that he peddles. But this seems to be an instance where even his most devoted followers don't seem to be taking the bait here. Benny